Chapter 940. Li Nanheng returned to the room and saw that the carpet had been laid flat by Feng Ling. He walked in. The bedroom door was not locked. Feng Ling had just picked up her phone and was about to lie on the bed when she heard his footsteps. "Your phone can still be used." Li Nanheng glanced at the thing in her hand. Feng Ling nodded and waved the phone in front of him. "It can be used." "Boss, you brought me to buy this phone last time." At that time, it was said that it was waterproof. However, it might have been soaked in the water that day, so it couldn't be turned on. Now the water in the phone has dried up. "It's fine. If you can't use it, buy another one. It works. It's no different from before." In order to prove that the phone was still working, Feng Ling raised the phone screen for him to see. An American military movie was playing on the screen. It had just started. It could be seen that she was just about to watch it. "Other than this kind of movie, what else do you like to watch?" Li Nanheng suddenly felt that on the way to pursuing Feng Ling, perhaps he could use some vulgar tricks that couldn't be more vulgar. After all, she had never experienced it before. He could just treat it as compensation for the experiences she had missed when she was young. No matter how vulgar and childish it was, he could accompany her. For example, he could take her out to watch a movie. "I don't like it. Kay recommended it to me, so I came to have a look." As Feng Ling spoke, she held her phone and sat on the bed. She took off her shoes and placed her bare feet on the bed. When Li Nanheng saw her pair of white and tender little feet, his dark gaze shifted slightly and landed on her phone again. "He recommended this kind of movie to you. Kay said that it's not that men don't scheme against each other. He told me to watch more movies and learn the tricks in them." Li Nanheng, Feng Ling's phone was suddenly taken away by the man. She raised her eyes to look at him in confusion. "What do you mean by scheming? That boy really doesn't teach you in a good way. You've been with him for so many years, but you haven't been led astray by him. You're really lucky." With that, Li Nanheng threw her phone aside. "If you can't sleep, come with me." Feng Ling got off the bed and followed him out. Li Nanheng took her to the room with fitness equipment. After turning on the light, he asked her if she had come in to practice. Feng Ling shook her head. "I haven't exercised for a few days, so I can't go overboard when I suddenly resume exercising. Otherwise, it will be counterproductive." The man walked to the treadmill and pressed a few buttons on it. The machine beeped as he adjusted the speed and mileage. "Jog for 10 kilometers first, then do balance training on the spot." Neither of these movements would affect the injury on her head, and her brain wouldn't move too fast either. Although it was already night, Feng Ling couldn't fall asleep. Boss had arranged physical training for her in a different way. Although there wasn't as much equipment as in the base, it was still good. Feng Ling waited by the side without any objections. However, after the man pressed the treadmill for a while, he said expressionlessly, "I haven't used it for a long time. I don't even know the machine is broken." "Feng Ling, then can't we run tonight? Go out and do balance training first." "I'll see what's wrong," the man said while checking the treadmill. Feng Ling nodded obediently and turned to go out. She looked around the living room and finally returned to the carpet she had just laid, lying on it to do balance training. However, when she pushed her limbs against the ground, she felt that her head also hurt. Although the injury on her forehead didn't hurt so much, when she pushed her head up, she felt a pain in her brain. She closed her eyes to endure the pain, but after a while, she climbed back to the carpet and raised her hand to put it on her head. After a minute's rest, she propped up her limbs again and began to do exercises. After repeating this several times, she finally recovered a little bit. At this moment, the doorbell rang again. Feng Ling turned her head to look at the door and then at the man who was repairing the treadmill inside. He didn't seem to hear it. someone had been here just now. Although she didn't know who it was, those who knew this place were probably acquaintances, so there shouldn't be any problem. She got up, walked to the door, and opened it. The moment she opened the door, Feng Ling's expression remained calm, but when the woman outside the door saw Feng Ling, her expression changed instantly. "Why is it you?" Feng Mingzhu looked at Feng Ling in astonishment. This brat named Feng Ling didn't give her face in the mall that time, which made her so angry that she wanted to smash her bag on his head. However, she felt that there must be a reason why Li Nanheng didn't let her in. Even if he didn't like her, he wouldn't even let her in unless there was someone else in his home. She just wanted to confirm if he was hiding a woman at home, but she didn't expect that it would be Feng Ling who opened the door. Feng Ling didn't expect to see this Miss Feng here, but Feng Ling didn't care. After glancing at her, she turned back and walked in expressionlessly, saying to the room inside, "Boss, someone is looking for you." Feng Mingzhu took the opportunity to follow Feng Ling in and quickly glanced around the apartment she had never been in before. There were no women's things and most of them were purely masculine. The colors were neat and tidy, and there was not the slightest bit of mess. There was some sweat on Feng Ling's forehead and he was slightly out of breath, but it could be seen that he had just done some simple exercise. So there were only 2 men in the apartment and no woman as she thought. Feng Mingzhu temporarily put down a worry in her heart, but she still looked at Feng Ling in confusion and asked, "Why are you here? Aren't you a member of the base? Why don't you train in the base or go out on missions? Why do you live in his place?" When Li Nanheng came out, he heard Feng Mingzhu's aggressive voice outside. He walked out and said in a clear voice, "Can't you see that Feng Ling's head is injured? A member of the base recuperating here is an eyesore to you, Miss Feng." Feng Mingzhu turned to look at Li Nanheng and then at the room behind him. Through the open door, she saw that there were fitness equipment inside, and her eyes immediately became much gentler. "Nanheng, I wanted to leave just now, but after thinking about it, I felt that it was rare for us to meet, so what do you mean? Was I too polite to make you mistakenly think that I was being patient with you? Or did you think that I wouldn't throw you out?" Chapter 941. Pa. As Li Nanheng spoke, the bag in Feng Mingzhu's hand fell to the ground with a thud. It was not difficult to see that her bag had fallen a bit strangely. How could she lose her grip on it? Feng Ling stood by the side and saw them but did not speak. She could tell from their conversation that Miss Feng had been here earlier and had returned to the door. A lipstick fell out of her bag. She kicked the lipstick to a place under the carpet where it could not be seen immediately. If she did not take the lipstick away now, even if she did not come in for a 3rd time tonight, she would come again tomorrow or the day after tomorrow with the excuse of looking for lipstick. However, Feng Ling did not speak. She was not good at talking. She turned to the room with fitness equipment and said as she walked, "Boss, I'm going to train first." Li Nanheng did not respond. His eyes were still fixed on Feng Mingzhu, who had just squatted down to pick up her bag. Feng Mingzhu stood up and looked up at him. She said awkwardly, "Sorry, you just want to see if I'm hiding a woman here?" Li Nanheng had not changed his clothes. He still looked sharp and cold. His eyes seemed to be fighting with someone. "Don't say that I don't have a woman here. Even if I do, it has nothing to do with you. Take back your excessive concern and gaze. Otherwise, this Li's attitude toward you will not even have the most basic politeness." Feng Mingzhu was stunned. Even though Li Nanheng's tone was still polite and he did not say anything too hurtful for the sake of his family, she had never seen him so cold. Because of what? Was it because she spoke impolitely to the woman named Feng Ling and had a bad attitude toward her? Or was it because she barged into his place without his permission? Feng Mingzhu held back her temper. "What did I do wrong? She was really unwilling to be treated like this. She clenched her fists tightly and almost roared. She barely managed to maintain half of her rationality. At least her voice didn't sound that angry, but her heart was already filled with all kinds of bitterness. I've already said what I should say, Li Nanheng said indifferently. Get out. I just like you. I just like you. I didn't do anything. Why do you hate me so much? Feng Mingzhu really could not stand it. Nanheng, I like you so much, but you treat me like this. You even let that ignorant brat stay here to recuperate, but you don't even give me time to go out for a cup of coffee with you. Every member of 11 base is injured because of the base. I am the person in charge of the base and I am responsible for everyone's safety. This is not something you are qualified to judge. But as for you saying that he is immature. Li Nanheng raised his eyebrows. When he spoke, he did not even look at Feng Mingzhu. Instead, he turned to look at the door of the room behind him and glanced at the short-haired girl who was trying to adjust the treadmill. He said mildly, "Has Feng Ling offended you?" Feng Mingzhu paused. She knew what she did at that time. Although it was a small thing, she was indeed in the wrong. If she said this in front of Nanheng, he would only hate her more. She was angry and furious, but there was nothing she could do about Feng Ling. If she knew this would happen, she should have found an opportunity to anger this brat. At least, she should have made him do something out of line. Only then could she successfully sue him in front of Nanheng. Moreover, this was not what he had expected at all. Who would have thought that she only came to find Nanheng, but Feng Ling was actually here like a ghost? Could it be that Feng Ling complained first? This brat didn't seem like a talkative person. Could it be that deep down, he was also a calculative person? The more Feng Mingzhu thought about it, the more uncomfortable she felt. She bit her lips harder. Feng Ling could not understand this kind of intelligent treadmill. She walked out and said, "Boss, it's getting late. I'll get up early tomorrow to train. You and Miss Feng can chat slowly. I'll return to my room first." "Stop right there." Feng Mingzhu glared at her. "Did you accuse him first? What did you add to the story to Nanheng's story?" Feng Ling originally did not want to pay attention to her. When she suddenly heard this, she did not stop and walked straight in. Feng Ling, Li Nanheng glanced at Feng Mingzhu's exasperated expression and asked mildly, "Did you have a grudge with Miss Feng?" "No." Feng Ling did not stop until she heard Boss Li's words. She said disapprovingly, "We only met once or twice. As for what Miss Feng said, I said to you, Boss, you know very well in your heart. I don't think I even mentioned Miss Feng's name." Li Nanheng turned to look at Feng Mingzhu. "She really didn't mention you." Feng Mingzhu could tell from Li Nanheng and Feng Ling's conversation and expressions that Feng Ling really didn't mention it. Wasn't she shooting herself in the foot? She secretly bit her lip. "By the way, when Miss Feng went to buy misai last time, I don't remember what happened." Feng Ling, who was originally not involved in the situation, was forcibly dragged in like this. She simply did not avoid it and said directly, "I only remember that Miss Feng said that she was boss's fiancée and asked me to bring her into the base to find you. I refused her because of the base's rules. After that, Miss Feng didn't seem very happy. Maybe because of this, I offended her." Feng Ling did not mention that Feng Mingzhu wanted to buy misai first. She only mentioned such a thing related to the so-called fiancé, but it happened to hit the most vulnerable point in Feng Mingzhu's heart. Feng Mingzhu opened her mouth and wanted to explain, but Li Nanheng's cold, and warning gaze had already turned to her. "Fiancé. Nanheng, I just said it," Li Nanheng smiled. However, when this man smiled, he was like a demon. He looked calm and elegant from beginning to end, but his smile could make one's goosebumps rise all over one's body. Feng Mingzhu still wanted to explain, but at this time, Feng Ling had already entered the bedroom. She had no intention of paying attention to her at all. In the future, don't come near my place again. Don't appear in my sight. Miss Feng, people should know how to respect themselves. Li Nanheng's eyes were deep. Do you need me to send you out? Feng Mingzhu was angry. However, before she could finish her words, she was frozen by the man's cold gaze. Feng Mingzhu bit her lip with reddened eyes and turned to leave. Suddenly, she heard the man say in an especially disgusted voice, "Take your things away." She paused and looked at him in confusion. She turned back, only to see that the man was coldly glancing at the lipstick she had thrown under the carpet. Chapter 942. Feng Mingzhu's back stiffened. After a long time, she bent down to pick up the lipstick. She couldn't stay any longer and quickly left. Li Nanheng didn't have time to talk to this woman anymore. He turned to look at the bedroom door that Feng Ling had closed. Feng Ling was about to go to bed. She wanted to watch the movie that Kay recommended to her, but before she lay down, the bedroom door was suddenly pushed open with a bang. She turned her eyes and saw that it was Li Nanheng. "Boss? Do you mind the words my fiancé?" The man stared at her face. Feng Ling's expression faltered. "Why do you ask? What do you think?" Li Nanheng saw that she had already sat on the bed and didn't walk over. He leaned against the door and looked straight at her. "I asked you to talk about the conflict between you and her. You skipped all the content and directly talked about the matter that she said she was my fiancé. You grasped this point of entry, which shows that you remember this matter and mind it very much." Feng Ling didn't know how to talk and reason, so she just said whatever she thought of. Did this mean that she minded it very much? Seeing that the man seemed to be in a good mood, Feng Ling secretly cursed him for being crazy, lifted the quilt, and got into it. Then she said, "It's not a big deal. Miss Feng insisted on telling me the reason, so I just said a few words as she wished. I don't have a deep impression of things that I don't care about, so I don't take it seriously at all. And I don't have a deep impression of things that I don't care about, but I have a deep impression of the matter that she claimed to be my fiancé." The man smiled. The corner of Feng Ling's mouth twitched. She simply lay down, raised her phone to make a gesture of watching a movie, and ignored him. Li Nanheng didn't probe further. He just smiled and said, "Have a good rest." He raised his hand to help her turn off the chandelier in the bedroom, left the wall lamp in front of the bed on, and closed the door. Feng Ling's injuries were almost healed. Aside from the occasional slight swelling pain when she did simple physical training, there was no longer any effect on her. The wounds on the surface no longer needed to be changed and only left a slight scar. Thankfully, this kind of injury was only caused by hitting the wall. Most of the injuries were under the skin and were not as difficult to heal as knife wounds or explosion wounds. As long as it was properly treated, there would be no more scars. But in the current situation where she could still see the traces, she needed to cover the fringe in front of her short hair. If her forehead was exposed, it would indeed look a little unsightly. At least she herself found it an eyesore. As a result, Feng Ling did not want to cut her hair too short in the short term. While Li Nanheng was out, Feng Ling made a call to the base hall and asked about the handling of the matter of her killing the commander. After all, when she asked Kay and the others, they all told her not to worry and to leave the matter to boss. However, if this matter could really be solved as soon as possible, Li Nanheng wouldn't go out often these days. Although he didn't say anything every time he came back, she could see that this matter couldn't be handled too casually. She had to be considerate in every aspect. She couldn't let the military bite on any point. Otherwise, all the previous efforts would be in vain. She didn't know what had happened, but when she called the base hall to learn about it, the people in the base hall didn't tell her too much. They only told her not to meet the people from the military and not to have any contact with people outside the base. From their tone, Feng Ling could roughly guess whether the matter had developed to a certain stage or not. The military had always been a very authoritative party in the United States, and it was the same in any country. The reason why the military hated 11 Base the most was that two tigers couldn't share one mountain. No matter what, when the commander of the military area was killed, it was impossible for them to deal with it easily, no matter from the perspective of public opinion or public opinion. In addition, the military and 11 Base had always been secretly displeased with each other. This matter could be regarded as the military getting hold of 11 Base's weakness, and they were probably trying to find ways to complain. If it weren't for the fact that she was a member of 11 Base and Li Nanheng didn't show up, she would probably have to die to atone for her crime. She glanced at the recent news about the U.S. military. The news of the commander's death had been suppressed and had never been reported, which meant that so far, only they knew about this matter, and the outside world had no way to know it. Looking at the clean pages of the news, Feng Ling briefly told the people in the base hall about her plan, but the people in the base hall told her to continue living outside and not to take any action for the time being. She should listen to Boss Li's instructions and not be impulsive. After hanging up the phone, Feng Ling's tense body slightly relaxed. In fact, she had long been mentally prepared that 11 Base would give up on her. It was not that her current situation was difficult to save, but that the military would definitely join forces with some people to pressure 11 Base, or threaten or lure them. With 11 Base's current situation, there would be many people who were jealous of 11 Base. After weighing the pros and cons, it was not difficult to understand why they would give up on her. However, the choice made by 11 Base was the opposite of what she thought. They didn't give up on her. In the evening, Li Nanheng sent her a message saying that he would go back to the Li family tonight and had something to discuss with the elders, so he asked her to have a good rest. Feng Ling glanced at the phone and lay down. She slept on the large bed alone, closed her eyes in the dark, but couldn't fall asleep. She never knew that it would be so fast to adapt to someone's existence. It had only been a few days, not even a week, but she was already used to the existence of another person in the bedroom opposite her, or in the study or the living room. As long as she opened the door of this bedroom, she would definitely see the light in the room where that person was in. It took her more than 10 years to adapt to living alone, learning to abandon loneliness and coldness, but she didn't expect that she would adapt to the temperature of someone else in such a short period of time. She was used to the feeling of having someone by her side. But before she completely got used to it, that person suddenly didn't come back tonight. Boss Li didn't seem to like returning to the Li family. Every time he returned to the Li family, he would look terrible. Obviously, he didn't get along with the elders of the Li family. Now that an official of the military had been killed, the pressure exerted on 11 Base probably came mostly from the elders of the Li family. Feng Ling turned over. Couldn't sleep. Chapter 943. Boss Li didn't need anyone to worry about him at all. But now she was actually worried about him. She knew that this feeling was not because she was worried that something would happen to him, but because of another kind of concern that she didn't particularly understand. After letting her imagination run wild for some time, she finally fell asleep in a daze. The next morning, Feng Ling did some simple physical training. Seeing that the weather outside was good today, she was really bored at home alone, and there was still no news from Li Nanheng. She sent him a text message asking when he would come back, but he didn't reply. At 12 o'clock, Feng Ling put on her coat and went out, but she remembered what Boss Li said. Don't leave the community. If you want to eat or buy something, there are 2 24-hour convenience stores in the community, so you don't have to go too far. She first went to the floor downstairs, which was the apartment that Li Nanheng said belonged to her. She opened the door and took a look. As expected, the decoration style was very simple. Because no one had lived in it, even though the decorations on the walls were very beautiful and clean, she felt that she could hear the echo of her breath when she stood inside. This place only lacked furniture and appliances. And this apartment was just below his apartment. Standing in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows, she could see the same street view as above. Even though Feng Ling didn't ask these days, she knew that this apartment was a very expensive place in Los Angeles. It was definitely a place where every inch of land was worth its weight in gold. However, the little money she earned probably couldn't even afford the down payment. After walking around here, she felt that it was not as interesting as upstairs. She turned and went out. Instead of going upstairs, she took the elevator down and planned to go to the convenience store to buy some noodles. When Boss Lee was not around, she couldn't always eat takeout. Although she wasn't very good at cooking, after all, she had never had the opportunity to cook since she was a child, she still knew how to boil noodles. Anyway, after it was cooked, she could buy some ready-made seasonings and mix it. Feng Ling walked out of the apartment. As soon as she stepped out of the door, she saw two people coming in. Seeing the two people coming toward her, Feng Ling's expression instantly changed from calm to indifference. Although there was no change on the surface, her eyes were much colder. The two people approaching the apartment were Feng Mingzhu and Qin Shuk. The moment she saw Feng Ling, Qin Shuk's eyes lit up. "Ah, little brother, you're really here." Feng Ling glanced at them. She didn't really understand the thoughts between women, but she could tell that Qin Shuk's personality was carefree and simple, while Feng Mingzhu was a very smart person. She clearly knew that Feng Mingzhu was not someone who could suppress things, but she called Qin Shuk over. What was her motive? Besides, hadn't Boss Lee already told her very clearly? Therefore, Feng Mingzhu clearly didn't come here for Li Nanheng. He brought Qin Shuk here. Could it be that he was here for her? "My cousin said she saw you around here a few days ago." I didn't believe her. I didn't expect you to really be here. "Ah, what's wrong with your head? Are you injured?" Qin Shuk came over with an excited expression and reached out to touch the wound on her head with concern. However, before her hand could touch within 10 centimeters of her, the calm and cold boy in front of her had already taken a step back. Qin Shuk's hand froze in mid-air and she looked at her blankly. Although she knew that Feng Ling's personality was cold, her expression didn't seem to be just cold. Instead, it seemed to be a little wary and distant. "If Miss Feng didn't find out why I live here, you wouldn't have come here again. Didn't Miss Qin ask your cousin these reasons?" Feng Ling said lightly. Qin Shuk's expression immediately changed. "Little brother, all right, Shuk, I don't mind telling you that the little brother you've been thinking about has recently caused a big disaster. Do you believe it? He killed the commander of the military, and then I don't know what he did, but he coaxed the entire 11 base to protect him even at the cost of going against the military. He refused to hand him over. Now even Nanheng has brought him to his residence and let him recuperate here. He's clearly a troublemaker and has caused so much trouble, but now he's living here with a clear conscience. He only has the ability to cause trouble but doesn't have the courage to take responsibility. He really doesn't have any manliness at all." As Feng Mingzhu spoke, she looked at Feng Ling with a sneer. She stared at the calm expression in Feng Ling's eyes, stepped on her high heels, and looked down at her. The Feng family has always been in contact with the military. If it weren't for this, I really wouldn't have thought of what you did. I also didn't expect that the reason you would live here is because you caused trouble and let Nanheng bear so much pressure for you, but you hide here as if nothing has happened. Can your conscience really be at ease?" Feng Ling glanced at her. Miss Fong, I'm not interested in where you got the news from. If you only know the gist of a matter but don't know the cause and the specific situation, I advise you not to speak nonsense. As for whether Boss Lee has borne the pressure for me, Boss will explain it to me directly. Miss Fong, you don't need to convey it to me. Everyone knows in their hearts, and so do I. You are not a member of 11 Base. You have no right to criticize my actions. Fong Ling glanced at her. Qin Shuk originally heard that little brother was here and happened to be bored, so she followed Feng Mingzhu to have a look. However, when she saw the two of them, one with resentment and the other with a cold and indifferent attitude, she was stunned. These two, what was going on? Feng Mingzhu snorted. I want to know how long you've been in 11 Base and how many meritorious deeds you've made to atone for such a big crime. You're really amazing. You killed the commander. 11 Base has been peaceful for so many years. This is the first time we've encountered such a big disaster, but the source is actually you. I really didn't know what Nanheng was thinking. He actually protected you. Cousin, didn't little brother say that no matter what happens, when you don't know the specific situation, it's better not to make a conclusion? Besides, little brother doesn't have any grudges with you. What's wrong with you? Qin Shuk saw that the situation was not right and rushed to smooth things over. Chapter 944. Feng Mingzhu's expression stiffened at Feng Ling's words. In fact, Feng Ling's tone was not harsh. In fact, she did not seem to be angry at all. However, it was precisely because of her calm and nonchalant appearance that made it seem as though she did not care about anything that Feng Mingzhu did on purpose. Feng Ling, I heard that you're not very popular in the base. Especially during training and assessments, you often resort to trickery, causing many people to dislike you. But don't think that your little cleverness is really useful against Nanheng. Sooner or later, he'll see through you. At that time, I'm afraid you won't even have the qualifications to kneel at his feet. 11 Base won't accept you either. Seeing that Feng Ling finally looked at her seriously, Feng Mingzhu felt as though she had won the game. She smiled. Although 11 Base has its own rules, as long as I want to investigate, there's nothing I can't find. In the past, I really didn't care about a brat like you, but I didn't expect that you even dared to live in Nanheng's place. I heard from the people in your base that you usually like to hook up with the men in the base. Look at your oily hair and face. Are you gay? Do you like men? Cousin. Why did she go too far? Qin Shuk felt a bit awkward standing by the side. Although the Feng Mingzhu she was familiar with was a little domineering, her character was actually not bad. Furthermore, under normal circumstances, only women would fight with each other like this. However, this little brother was a man. Was there a need to be so confrontational? Furthermore, it seemed like she wouldn't give up until he was chased away. Shuk, let me tell you. Do you know why I brought you here today? I just want you to see that this little brother you've always liked, perhaps you've wronged him. I think there's an 80% chance that he likes men and has no interest in women at all. Otherwise, why wouldn't he respond to a young and beautiful girl like you? Feng Mingzhu chuckled. Nowadays, anyone dares to mingle in 11 Base. I really need to talk to the Li family's grandfathers about this. Don't sully the good atmosphere of 11 Base because of a man who is neither a man nor a woman. No, I didn't pursue him much. I only asked for his number twice, but he didn't give it to me. Cousin, don't misunderstand. I didn't take it to heart. Qin Shuk frowned. Feng Mingzhu paused and abruptly turned to glare at her. Whose side are you on? Do you value your lover more than your sister? Qin Shuk looked innocent and awkward. No, I'm definitely on your side, cousin, but there's no grudge between me and little brother. I can't say these words. I like him, but I don't ask for anything. Besides, little brother is very easygoing to me. Feng Mingzhu's expression became even uglier. Her expression showed that she originally wanted to find a helper, but this helper was siding with an outsider. Feng Ling casually took out her phone and glanced at the time. Thinking that she didn't have anything to do, she wasn't afraid to waste time here, so she put her phone back and raised her eyes. She silently and mildly looked at the woman who came to find trouble. In fact, she also found it strange. Why did Feng Mingzhu like to find trouble with her? Although they all had the surname Feng, they were clearly not a family. Could it be that they were born to offend each other? Feng Ling's attitude was indifferent. Feng Mingzhu coldly said, "The Li family's grandfathers already know about your matter. Even if Nanheng wants to protect you, I'm afraid the grandfathers won't agree. Just wait for the base to chase you out. Even if the crime of killing the commander will not be blamed on you, you've messed up the atmosphere of the base. The grandfathers will not allow you to continue staying." Feng Ling's face was expressionless and indifferent. There was basically no obvious change. However, when she put her phone into her pocket, her fingers hidden in her pocket clenched slightly and gradually tightened. In the end, even her knuckles turned white. What she cared about the most was whether she could stay in 11 base safely or not. If because of this matter, Feng Mingzhu took the opportunity to make things difficult for her and even directly reported it to the Li family. Even if she would really be affected. "So, Miss Feng, you came today on behalf of the Li family's grandfathers?" Feng Ling asked mildly. Feng Mingzhu couldn't see through her thoughts, but she knew that this brat would definitely pay attention to this. She immediately smiled disdainfully and said, "This kind of matter will be known by the Li family sooner or later. Don't you know how many people in your base dislike you? Sooner or later, this matter will spread. I just talked with the grandfathers. They are not interested in your affairs, but they are obviously very angry that you disturbed the atmosphere in the base and now blatantly live in Nanheng's place. I'm not passing on a message on behalf of anyone. Even if I don't pass on a message, you will soon receive a letter to leave 11 base. There will no longer be a place for you to stay in 11 base. Miss Qin, if there's nothing else, you can go back. I know what I'm doing. I don't need anyone to judge me. I know my own character. Although we don't have much of a relationship, seeing that you're pure and enthusiastic and don't have any deep thoughts, I suggest you stay away from some overthinking relatives in the future." Feng Ling was too lazy to pay attention to Feng Mingzhu. She turned to look at Qin Shuk, who had a puzzled expression. Qin Shuk nodded and wanted to say something, but Feng Mingzhu couldn't stand Feng Ling's indifference. But thinking that he would probably not even be able to smile after being kicked out of the base, she didn't want to argue with him. Feng Mingzhu raised her chin and said, "This matter of 11 base must have all the connections of the Li family, the Feng family, and the United He Nation to come forward. After all, you are the superior of the military area. I think you might as well go out and surrender yourself. Don't make it so difficult for them to protect you. Anyway, you will be kicked out soon. Before you leave, you should do something good so that they won't worry about you. What do you think?" Feng Ling said nothing and expressionlessly turned to go to the convenience store not far away. Qin Shuk hurriedly made way for the door of the apartment. Seeing this, Feng Mingzhu was a little anxious and directly sneered. "Feng Ling, do you want to see Nanheng being heavily oppressed by the Li family because of you? Do you know how despicable the elders of the Li family are? His unrestrained character is now even more restrained because of you. He even agreed to all kinds of harsh conditions put forward by the elders without hesitation. You are really a troublemaker. Dash. Chapter 945. Li Nanheng didn't return for 2 days. Suddenly, Feng Ling received a call from the Li family. Grandfather Li called her personally and asked her to meet him. After meeting Feng Mingzhu yesterday, Feng Ling's heart was heavy for the entire day. When the Li family called, although her heart was still uneasy, it finally settled down. At the very least, this way, she could wait for an outcome. She wouldn't have to stay here without knowing anything. In the car, Feng Ling sat in the back seat and let the driver drive. She stared out of the window in a daze. The driver asked her for the specific route, but she didn't know. She only told him the specific location that old Master Li had told her. The driver took a long time to find it. Fortunately, she came out early and was not late. After arriving at the agreed place with Grandfather Li, Feng Ling learned that not only the Li family was here, but also several military leaders, people from the United Nations, military reporters, and other people who could play a role in this matter. Before entering, she found a mirror in the bathroom and tidied up her black uniform. Old Master Li sent someone to call her, but her eyes did not move. Although she was looking at the mirror, it was obvious that she was not looking at herself. Little brother Feng Ling, the person sent by the Li family, was right outside the bathroom. He was dressed in a black suit. It could be seen that he often worked for the elders. He spoke politely, and his tone was crisp. There are a lot of people here. Don't let them wait too long, especially those from the Li family. If you want a good result, I advise you to take them seriously. Don't neglect them too much. Feng Ling's eyes moved. She looked at the man outside and nodded. I understand. The other party urged, hurry up, time is running out. With that, the man turned around and left. His footsteps were quick, and it seemed that he had indeed been urged to come here. Feng Ling looked at his back and had a subtle feeling that today's event had nothing to do with Li Nanheng. There had been no news from him for 2 days. If he was involved in this matter, he would definitely tell her, even if it was just a call or a message. Although the man just now looked polite and well-mannered, his eyes were filled with contempt as if he was looking at someone who was about to die, and he didn't have much patience. When he walked into the place that old Master Li had mentioned, everyone was already there. This was the first time she had seen Grandfather Li and other leaders of the military and the United Nations. Feng Ling felt that she had seen a really big scene because of this incident, so she stood among them calmly. There were 4 elders in the Li family. The eldest was Li Zhenyan, the second was Li Jinghua, the eldest was Li Wenshang, and the 4th was Li Jianrong. They were all over 70 years old. The eldest, Li Zhenyan, was Li Nanheng's biological grandfather. He was over 80 years old. The other 4 did not have any grandchildren. It was said that Li Nanheng grew up with these 4 famous elders. He did not enjoy the treatment of being a distant relative like other people's grandchildren. Instead, he was thrown into 11 base by these elders at a very young age. Although Li Nanheng was the only grandson of the Li family and was known as Young Master Li, he had never enjoyed the good life of a young master. In front of him were 4 old men holding 4 crutches like rulers. Li Zhenyan looked at this young man who was neither servile nor overbearing, even though he knew what would happen when he was called here alone. It seemed that he was different from the effeminate and gloomy personality that Feng Mingzhu had described him to be. The other elders also narrowed their eyes, sizing up the young man named Feng Ling. The elders continued their usual style and spoke in a cold and commanding tone. They asked some irrelevant questions, such as when Feng Ling entered the base, how was her sniper training, and finally, when they talked about her skills and speed, Li Zhenyan cut to the chase. Feng Ling, although we haven't had the chance to go to the base to see you in person, we've heard some of your deeds in the past few years. You've performed very well in all the examinations among the newcomers. I didn't expect you to be so skinny, but you can actually pick up a sniper rifle effortlessly. It can be seen that you're a talent born for the base, but no matter how outstanding you are and how loyal you are to the base, you still affected the peace between the entire 11 base and the United States by killing the military commander. This is not a small matter. You've been hiding for so many days. Haven't you thought about how to give the military an explanation? Even at this moment, Feng Ling was still in a daze and had not completely entered the state of mind. She knew very well that since Feng Mingzhu dared to contact Grandfather Li and say those words, it meant that Li Nanheng was really tied down by something. Perhaps the reason was her. Even if the fat commander was in the wrong, killing the military commander was not a simple reason that could be used as an excuse. Even if the military couldn't do anything to 11 base because of the Li family and Li Nanheng's attitude, in order to save some face, they had to find a reason to appease their anger. At least, they had to find a way out. And the most appropriate way out was for her to apologize with her death. This way, both sides would return to peace. If she continued to hide, this matter would only cause more and more trouble for Li Nanheng. Although he didn't say it, she wouldn't allow herself to implicate him. Even if she implicated others, she wouldn't do this. On this matter, she had always thought that her side was in the right, but she had neglected how large the power of 11 base and the military was. It was not easy to make them smaller. After all, Boss Li was really good to her. She couldn't keep harming him because of her. Feng Ling clenched her fists by her sides. She raised her head and was about to speak when she abruptly saw that on the other side of the marble stairs, next to several expensive potted plants, stood a cold and tall man. Li Nanheng had one hand in the trouser pocket of his trousers, and his tall and straight body leaned slightly against the white European-style railing beside the marble stairs. His handsome face was hidden in the darkness, looking gloomy. He was looking at her as if he had been looking at her since she walked in here, and his dark eyes carried a carefree and fearless aura. Seeing that Li Nanheng was here, Feng Ling swallowed the words that were on the tip of her tongue to say that she would take all the blame. The current scene was different from what she expected. She thought that Boss Li was locked up by the elders or something, but looking at his expression, it seemed that the current situation was only passive on the surface. In fact, it was under his control. Chapter 946. Grandfather Li saw the direction Feng Ling was looking at and quietly turned to look. When he caught a glimpse of Li Nanheng, he did not say anything but glanced at her again. I've given you a few minutes. Haven't you thought about how to continue? Or are you going to keep silent like this? You don't even dare to admit what you've done. Li Nanheng's eyes were immersed, and he had no intention of making eye contact with her. Feng Ling suddenly recalled Feng Mingzhu's words. Therefore, he didn't go back or contact her for the past few days. Perhaps it was because the Li family's grandfather suspected something. He didn't want her to be more suspected and hurt, so he temporarily avoided her and didn't contact her. Even if it was just a phone call or a text message, as long as the old master wanted to investigate, he would still be able to find out. Thinking about it this way, everything made sense. Therefore, although the elders of the Li family seemed to be here to denounce her, since they did not stop Li Nanheng from coming, it meant that they did not set a dead end for her but gave her a chance to explain or appeal. Such an opportunity was hard to come by. After all, the people present were all authoritative figures. Little brother Feng Ling, the man from the Li family, raised his eyebrows and reminded her softly. Feng Ling came back to herself and looked at the people sitting in front of her with a peaceful expression on her face. Instead of saying that she intended to take full responsibility for the crime, she told them about how she was suddenly called to the military area and everything that happened in the military area, including the surveillance camera installed in her and Kay's room. She did not leave out a single word. After that, she said calmly, "Yes, I did kill the commander. I admit to this crime, but if you have seen the surveillance video of the scene at that time, you should be very clear that I didn't do it at the beginning. Everyone has the desire and instinct to survive. My life and Kay's were in his hands. In that kind of situation, he was cursing and insulting me, and Kay's life was also threatened. I'm sorry, I really didn't consider the overall situation at that time, and I didn't consider the deep friendship between the base and the military. Oh, so your attitude is that you don't admit that you're wrong? Feng Ling coldly curved her lips. I admit to the crime of murder, but as for the so-called right or wrong. She paused for a moment and casually glanced at the man standing quietly in the distance. She said clearly, I didn't do anything wrong. Why should I admit my mistake? You're really arrogant. The others were expressionless, but the faces of the military leaders were instantly filled with anger. Feng Ling didn't hesitate and continued, I have been in 11 base for several years, and I have been taught by the drill masters and teachers in the base. They taught me how to be a person and how to deal with things. If I killed someone and broke the law, I should admit it, but if I did not do anything wrong, even if someone broke my knee, I should not kneel down and admit it. Feeling Nanheng's gaze, she paused and gave a faint smile. In addition, I was not hiding in the past few days, but because the commander kept smashing my head against the wall, I was in a coma for several days and just woke up in the past 2 days. You should have seen the situation in the video at that time. If I really died in the hands of the commander, I'm afraid that my death would be quite miserable. My skull would be cracked, and it would not be too much for me to be in a coma for 10 days or even half a month. Is the commander a mortal person? Am I not flesh and blood? Grandfather Li looked at her and his voice sounded cold and harsh. What makes you think that 11 base will not convict you for this matter? Feng Ling lowered her eyes. Her voice was not loud, and right now, it was much warmer and quieter than usual. Because the teachers in 11 base once said that no matter whether we are the newcomers, the veterans, the elite members, the drill masters, or the person in charge, we all work for the higher-ups and everyone is equal. And there is an old saying in China that even if the prince breaks the law, the common people will be punished the same way. Even if I killed the military commander because of excessive self-defense, the equality between people is enough to prove that he only has himself to blame. It is my business to bear the crime of killing someone, but the crime that the commander should bear, in the end, was actually borne with his life. This is also his business. If you are not the person involved, you are not qualified to judge the situation at that time. Grandfather Li raised his eyebrows slightly again. Then, the military said that Nanheng wholeheartedly protected you because he is interested in men like the commander and because of his personal feelings. Today, Feng Ling was wearing the same black uniform as usual. Standing here, she was full of righteousness, neither servile nor overbearing. As soon as Grandfather Li said this, she immediately understood the purpose of this scene today. The purpose of the Li family's elders was nothing else but the reputation of 11 base and Nanheng. They didn't care whether they sacrificed a small role or let the military swallow the humiliation in the end. They only cared about the impact of this public opinion on the base and Nanheng. The elders did not mean to protect anyone, nor did they mean to target anyone, but obviously, anyone who dared to criticize the Li family behind their backs was against them. He was giving Feng Ling a chance to explain. Feng Ling smiled. As far as I know, when Boss Li goes on missions with the members of the base, he will always rush to the front of any dangerous mission. Even if he is the person in charge of the base, even if he is the only grandson of the Li family, he has never pushed or betrayed his members. Everyone in 11 base knows Boss's character. Now that such a thing happened, Boss will protect me after knowing that I was wronged. This is also human nature. This is the first time I have heard such a rumor in this regard. Is he interested in all the members of the base who are protected by Boss? Since I entered the base, I haven't spent much time with Boss Li. I heard several drill masters in the base say that once on a mission, someone blocked a bullet for Boss and died on the spot. Boss sat in the minefield with his brother's body in his arms all night and didn't leave. Should such a brotherly relationship be tarnished like this? At this time, Grandfather Lee smiled again and asked meaningfully, "Then it is rumored in the base that you fooled around with others and were despised and ostracized by many members. What is the reason?" Chapter 947. After a few seconds, Feng Ling said flatly, "Where's the evidence? How can you judge my character just based on the nonsense of a few members who have a problem with me? There are thousands of people in the base. I want to know who can stand up and judge me on behalf of all the brothers in the base. Everything I've done is fair and above board. If you really want to investigate my character, I'm happy to accept the investigation and will fully cooperate with you. As for how some members in the training camp criticize me, I don't care." She said this casually, but everyone present could hear the meaning behind her words. The base was full of men, and there weren't so many messy things. Those who were not involved in the incident would not get involved, and those who cared about her would only care about her silently. They would not run out to gossip when the military went in to investigate. Those who deliberately came out to represent all the members of the base were the ones who had ulterior motives. They might have been planning to take her away for a long time. Most of the time, the real problem was not the person that others were talking about, but the person who was spreading the rumors. Feng Ling's words were translated to mean that a person who was right and wrong would definitely do something wrong, but she was definitely not a person who was right and wrong. If he wanted to find out the truth, he had to start from the source of these rumors, not from her. Feng Ling's gaze was magnanimous enough. Standing in front of such a group of people, he remained indifferent and neither servile nor overbearing. It could be seen how steady and down-to-earth this Feng Ling was. Although he looked a little petite, he was fair and clean and was very likable. He was not the type of person who was oily and mischievous. Of course, the premise was that Feng Ling didn't lie. This Feng Ling had good facial features and was quiet. Even those who were not interested in men would instinctively want to help her when she was wronged, let alone the people in the base who had a deep friendship with her. Therefore, the rumors in the past few days were broken by Feng Ling's personal explanation and proof. The Li family's elders had been in the wind and rain for so many years, so they were very good at judging people. Now that they had seen Feng Ling with their own eyes, they more or less knew who she was. Also, if this Feng Ling really had feelings for Li Nanheng, she could also see it. But what they saw was only sincerity and cleanliness in Feng Ling's eyes. Whether it was in the matter or in the relationship, she was clean, without the slightest bit of guilt. Old Masters Li didn't reveal anything on the surface. With smiles on their faces, they looked at the other people sitting in the room. "What else do you want to ask? The person is already here. Whether you want to take him away and lock him up, go through the normal legal channels, or settle him here directly, it's all up to you." The military leader's expressions were not very good. If the people of the United Nations were not here, they would certainly choose to take this Feng Ling away. But now that the conversation had reached this point, it was as though Feng Ling was completely innocent. It was as though 11 Base was the one who had been suffering all this time. It was as though the military had deliberately brought her into the military base and caused trouble. In fact, 11 Base was the victim. Now what are they gonna do? It's impossible for them to take her away just like that. Just when the military leader was about to say that they should go through the legal channels, the leader of the United Nations said, "We've thoroughly investigated the whole thing through the surveillance and the confession of the parties involved. If Commander Rick made a mistake first and 11 Base wants to punish him, the military will push Commander Rick out to settle the whole thing by himself. Now there are two parties involved, one is injured, and the other is dead. In fact, no party has wronged the other party. The one who did the wrong first has already paid the price, so there's no need to continue to seek revenge. As for Brother Feng Ling, he is one of the most worthy snipers of 11 base. It's not his fault, but he must be punished for the crime of murder. If we don't go through the legal process, we'll choose another way to let him be punished." The military leaders' eyes suddenly changed and they clenched their hands on their knees. "Don't pursue revenge." The purpose of the Lee family's elders calling them here today was for this result, not to really give the military an explanation. But Lee Nanheng's eyes were wide open. Sure enough, these 4 old men were all wily old foxes. They were very clear about who was close to them. Even if they were not familiar with Feng Ling, as long as she was a member of 11 base, they would never put down their pride. And the military didn't get any benefits from either Lee Nanheng or the elders of the Lee family on this matter. Feng Ling's brain went blank for a few seconds. Just like that. She didn't come to die. This was a scene specially arranged by the Lee family for her to defend herself. She subconsciously raised her head and looked in the direction of Lee Nanheng. He was still standing there and looking at her indifferently. His eyes seemed to fall on her, but it also seemed that he wasn't looking at her, but when he looked away, she inexplicably felt that he was looking at her. The man's slender and well-defined fingers carelessly played with the silver lighter in his hand. He was so calm that it made one feel at ease, but at the same time, there was a hidden arrogance and indifference. Feng Ling's heart, which had been on tenterhooks ever since Feng Mingzhu said those words to her, finally relaxed. She looked in his direction indifferently and then withdrew her gaze, waiting for their punishment. Although she felt that she was out of danger, Feng Ling couldn't figure out the true intentions of the elders of the Li family, so she remained silent and didn't say anything else. Feng Ling didn't like to defend herself too much. What Knife had said earlier was merely what she had seen and experienced. She wouldn't say anything more than that. And when she thought of the man who had been standing there quietly, she couldn't panic. There is another person involved in this matter, and that is Danny Ken. Now that Commander Rick is dead, Danny Ken is also involved in this matter. Why don't we let him come over and have a chat? Grandfather Lake suddenly changed the topic. The few people present didn't expect these elders to play Tai Chi with them like this. In the end, not only did they not do anything to Feng Ling, but now they actually took the opportunity to start making things difficult for the military. Let Danny Ken come over, the military man said coldly to his subordinates behind him. Then, Feng Ling found that from the moment they started talking about Danny Ken, she seemed to have nothing to do with it. Then what should she do now? She turned to look at Li Nanheng, but the man just put one hand in his trouser pocket and chuckled lowly. He turned to leave. Feng Ling was dumbfounded. Then should she leave as well? Should she leave by herself or with him? Should she follow him or not? Chapter 948. Seeing that Grandfather Li's attention was all on the people from the military, it seemed that her arrival today was just a formality. After understanding the situation in front of her, Feng Ling turned to follow him. Li Nanheng walked in front, and Feng Ling quickly followed him. She didn't slow down until she was behind him, but she still kept a distance of 1 meter. When they walked out of the main door, Li Nanheng suddenly stopped, and Feng Ling also quickly stopped, lest she bumped into his back like before. The man took out a cigarette and lit one. He held the cigarette between his fingers and glanced back at her coldly. "Why are you following me, boss?" Feng Ling didn't understand the situation at the beginning, but now she understood the situation in front of her. Her eyes were very sincere. "I didn't know all this was planned by you, boss. I almost made things worse. Sorry." Li Nanheng looked at the main door of the hotel behind him, turned around indifferently, and continued to walk, and Feng Ling hurriedly followed him. When they reached the tall black Hummer, the man narrowed his eyes, took a deep breath, and then exhaled a mouthful of white smoke. Then he threw the unfinished cigarette on the ground and stepped on it to extinguish it. I think you are also very capable. As soon as you come in, you plan to take all the blame yourself. Do you think I hid you at home for so many days just to let you stand up and take the blame today? What do you think 11 Base is? What do you think the Lee family is? What do you think I am? No, boss, I just thought, you thought I was controlled by those elders. You wanted to save me in such a stupid way. Feng Ling knew she was in the wrong. Just now, she was really impulsive because of what Feng Mingzhu said. She almost thought that he had to bear the blame because of her, so she just wanted to bear all the blame herself and didn't want to implicate him. Fortunately, she didn't say anything wrong. Feng Ling was silent for a moment and then said softly, "Sorry." Seeing her look as if she knew she was wrong, Li Nanheng didn't say anything more, nor did he want her to go back with him. He just turned his head to look at the door not far away, and after a moment, he said, "In the past 2 days when I was not at home, did you see anyone?" No. No. Why are you suddenly so negative? Did you forget what I said? Feng Ling met his gaze, pursed her lips, and did not speak. She didn't want to talk about Feng Mingzhu, but although she was calm at the time and didn't seem to change, she was still affected by Feng Mingzhu's words. Therefore, it turned out that Li Nanheng was right. As long as it wasn't him who said it, she didn't want to believe it. For example, today, she was almost brainwashed by Feng Mingzhu and almost made a big mistake. I didn't expect the elders of the Li family to help me. At first, I thought they wanted me to come out and settle this matter. You really don't know anything about the outside world since you were young. You don't even know what's going on with the Li family. Li Nanheng looked at her coldly. It's not that easy to step on the Li family. Even if the elders aren't familiar with you, 11 Base is their blood, sweat, and tears when they were young. They won't mistreat their own people because of the military region's mistakes. And I only realized it later. At first, I didn't really understand. Feng Ling's eyes were a bit innocent. Boss, did I say something wrong just now? Seeing her begging for mercy, Li Nanheng didn't speak anymore. He reached out to her and said in a low voice, "All right, let's go eat." She did come here without eating. She was already prepared to be pushed into the abyss here today. Right now, she was indeed very hungry. But looking at the man in front of her, she had an indescribable feeling. Before she could raise her hand, the man's hand grabbed her wrist, opened the car door, and threw her into the car. Then he got into the car and drove away. In the car, Feng Ling said while fastening the seatbelt, "So, I don't have to hide anymore." The man drove and looked ahead. He said lightly, "I didn't hide for the past few days. First, I let you recuperate. Second, I didn't want to be discovered by the people of the military region." Feng Ling looked at the scenery outside the car. Indeed. If she had returned to the base a few days ago and maintained the same relationship with the brothers in the base, the military would definitely talk about her. But these days, she hadn't come out. No one knew whether she had woken up or not, or what had happened to her. In this way, when 11 Base put her matter on the table, it would be easier to control it. Otherwise, it would be easy for others to talk about it. If I wasn't 100% sure, I wouldn't have allowed the elders to call you out. Next time, don't let your imagination run wild. If your boss can't even handle such a small matter, 11 Base can have a new owner. The man took the coat from behind and threw it to her with one hand. He controlled the steering wheel with the other, quickly turned the car around, and drove in another direction. Although he didn't say much, looking at the coat that was suddenly thrown to her, Feng Ling understood what he meant. When she came out, she was in a hurry and had been thinking about something. The weather outside was already very cold. She had braved the cold wind and hailed a taxi to rush over. She was only wearing a t-shirt inside and a black combat uniform outside. It was indeed very cold. Feng Ling put on the coat and was about to say thank you, but when the word came to her mouth, she didn't say it out. She felt that Boss Lee was a little angry at this moment. Just now, when she ran over to sacrifice herself, she had angered him. It was better for her to speak less now. In front of a Chinese restaurant on the commercial street, the black Hummer stopped, and Li Nanheng got out of the car. Feng Ling saw that he planned to take her to eat Chinese food. She did say that she liked Chinese food, so she got out of the car without any objection. When she got out of the car, a cold wind blew, blowing up the short hair on Feng Ling's forehead that was used to cover the wound, and the red wound on her forehead was dazzling against her fair skin. Li Nanheng looked back to see this scene, but because she was wearing his coat, Feng Ling wrapped herself in the coat, trotted to catch up with him, stood behind him, and looked up at him. "Boss, don't you want to eat?" Every time she wore his clothes, it was like a child wearing an adult's clothes. Why was it that every time he wanted to be angry with her for a while, he would inexplicably calm down when she looked so cute and silly even though she clearly didn't look stupid? Adorably silly. Feng Ling could easily give Fat Tai a shoulder throw in the base. How on earth did this word come together with her? Chapter 949. After entering the restaurant, Li Nanheng asked Feng Ling to order by herself and told her to order for 3 people. 3 people. Would there be others coming? Feng Ling didn't understand, but seeing that Boss Lee seemed to be busy with something, she didn't ask much. She ordered about the amount of meat and vegetables that could be eaten by 3 people. Then she ordered 2 cups of plain water and waited for the so-called third person to arrive. Li Nanheng sat at the table and watched the surveillance video that had just been sent to him on the screen. Just downstairs, Feng Mingzhu came to his apartment with Qin Shuk and happened to block Feng Ling at the door. She couldn't hear anything in the video and could only see Feng Mingzhu saying a lot to Feng Ling with an aggressive expression, but Feng Ling didn't say anything. After watching the surveillance video, Li Nanheng threw the phone on the table expressionlessly and looked up at Feng Ling, who was holding a glass and drinking water. "Feng Mingzhu went to see you again." Feng Ling paused. She didn't intend to say this. How did he know? She moved the glass away and answered honestly, "N. When you first came today, you were in a bad mood." Did it have something to do with her? "A little, but I didn't take what she said too seriously, but I was indeed afraid that I would implicate you." Li Nanheng's eyes turned colder. "In the future, stay away from her. She's a spoiled and lawless young lady. I even avoid her like a plague. You've met her many times." Feng Ling didn't explain much. "I'll pay attention next time." Li Nanheng didn't say more. Seeing that Feng Ling was so sincere that she didn't dare to hide anything in her heart, he smiled and picked up the menu. "What did you order?" Feng Ling pointed to the dishes on the menu. Just as the two of them were talking, the door of the restaurant opened again, and a tall and handsome man walked in. Because the weather had turned cold recently, and it was snowing lightly, the man wore a white shirt inside and a long iron gray windbreaker outside. He looked clean and noble, and he walked straight in their direction. "Why do we have to meet at such a place?" Qin Siding's gaze paused on Feng Ling for a second and then he glanced at Li Nanheng who had just closed the menu and put it aside. "Sit." Li Nanheng gestured to another chair with his chin. Qin Siding pulled out a chair and sat down. Seeing Feng Ling sitting quietly by the side, he smiled at her. "Hello, I'm Qin Siding." Feng Ling nodded at him. She forgot where she heard the name Qin Siding. Anyway, she must have heard of him. He seemed to be a very young doctor with high attainments in the medical field. He had a good relationship with Boss Lee. She didn't know much about him. "Your expression is so strange as if we've met for the first time." Qin Siding didn't let the atmosphere turn awkward. In fact, I've seen you before today. When you were unconscious, I treated your wound. Nanheng and I are friends. We're all on the same side. Don't be too restrained. Fengling didn't know how to communicate with others. She nodded and said, "Thank you, Dr. Qin." She didn't expect that such a little girl dressed as a boy would be so gentle and quiet. She thought she was a tomboy, but it seemed that she was wrong. Qin Sighting didn't say more and just glanced at Li Nanheng. "It's all settled. It's not a big problem. Grandpa Li has come forward. Do you think there can be any problem?" Li Nanheng handed the menu to him. "What do you want to drink?" "No, I'm flying back to High City tonight. I have to leave in a while." Qin Sighting glanced at the time and then at Fengling. "Have you been to the hospital recently?" "I didn't bring those portable medical equipment when I went to treat you. I'm not sure if your concussion is serious." "Not yet. I'll check it tomorrow." "Okay, have you had a bad headache recently?" "Fortunately, it's much better. As long as it's not a particularly big exercise, I basically don't feel any pain when my head is shaken. That's not a big problem. Judging from the force of the impact, a concussion is inevitable, but it should be only a slight one. You'll be fine after a period of rest." Fengling nodded again and didn't speak again. "Why did you go back in such a hurry?" Li Nanheng asked. "Mo Jingshan went back to High City today. I went back on the same day as him, so I booked the same flight." "Why did he go back to High City?" "Mo Xiaozi is willing to let him go. Isn't SHE Group still waiting for him to take over?" Li Nanheng frowned. "Speaking of which, I haven't contacted him for some time. He didn't say much, but as far as I know, he seems to have found the girl who saved him by the Los Angeles River. She is in High City. It happens that the relationship between him and Mo Xiaozi has reached a freezing point recently. If he wants to leave, who can stop him?" Li Nanheng sneered. "Isn't the girl who saved him Su Jilan?" Qin Sighting leaned against the back of the chair leisurely, stretching his long legs forward casually, and said indifferently, "Even you and I know that the Su family's daughter is not the real owner. How could Mo Jingshan not know that? Mo Xiaozi's plan is useless in front of his son. I'm afraid that the person who can scheme against Mo Jingshan is not born yet. Speaking of which, he was injured in the explosion of the plane cabin on the Los Angeles River. 11 Base is also responsible for it. I'm indebted to the girl who saved him. If I really find her, ask her to tell me if I need anything from her. Now I don't know who she is. You know his temper. He always knows what he is doing and is too lazy to tell others. I don't even know what he plans to do when he returns to High City. He doesn't want the inheritance of SHE Group. Who knows what he will do when he returns to the Mo family in High City." Li Nanheng sneered and lit a cigarette. "What's the point of inheriting the family business? It's all a group of ambitious managers. Based on Mo Jingshan's usual style, if he wants to set up a company, he will definitely be the next dark horse to appear in High City's business world. As long as he is given enough time, I'm afraid that in the future, no he company can compare to the company he sets up. One is a boring business struggle, and the other is a sudden financial challenge. Which one of them can stump him? I'm tired of staying in the United States. It's not bad to go back to High City when I have time." Qin Sighting smiled. After all, the Li family has some connections with High City. Although they later took root in Los Angeles, it's not bad to go back occasionally. Especially you, don't you have anyone you like? If you go back to China and meet a girl, just bring her back and marry her. Chapter 950. She didn't know who Qin Sighting was talking to. Fengling, who was about to pick up the glass, paused slightly, but it was a very slight movement that was not easily noticed, and then she continued to drink water. Li Nanheng gave him a sideways glance. Enchanting smiled silently and gave him a look to urge him to work harder. Li Nanheng sneered. I'm afraid I'm Jinxian and I can't compare to you. Few people can experience the experience of being dumped by a woman after sleeping with you. Sure, Nianj clearly loves you to death, but in the end, she left so decisively and heartlessly. People who don't know you might think your performance in bed is so bad that you scared her away. Enchanting looked as if he was not stabbed by his cold knife and smiled lightly. Indeed, I can't compare to her. After all, the person in charge of 11 base, Boss Li, is still a virgin. Pooh! Before Li Nanheng reacted, Feng Ling almost spat out her saliva. She barely held back the saliva that was about to come to her mouth, turned her head away, and raised her hand to cover her mouth. Li Nanheng and Enchanting looked back at her at the same time. Seeing Feng Ling's expression, Li Nanheng's face instantly darkened. However, Enchanting glanced at him with a "something's up" expression, still smiling without saying a word. After that, they just ate something simple. Enchanting didn't eat much. After putting down the chopsticks, he looked at the time and was about to go back to get his things. He had to catch a plane back to High City in the evening, so he left first. Only the two of them were left at the table again. Since Li Nanheng glared at her, Feng Ling had been lowering her head to eat silently, not saying a word. Li Nanheng looked at the girl who had been lowering her head to eat and put down the chopsticks with a "paw" sound. Why were you so excited just now? Feng Ling, she silently raised her head, her eyes innocent. What are you excited about? I didn't. Seeing that she didn't dare to offend him at all for the time being, Li Nanheng estimated that he wouldn't be able to get any more information from her, so he coldly pursed his thin lips and looked at her. She finally finished eating under Boss Li's cold stare. When they walked back to the parking lot, Feng Ling followed behind the man. She fell 2 steps behind him. Looking at the tall and straight back of the man in front of her, she remembered what Grandfather Li had said today. Although Grandfather Li was on 11 Base's side, he also warned her to keep a distance from Li Nanheng when there were rumors. Otherwise, Li Nanheng would really be stained with the blood of Grandfather Li. She walked behind him and called him, "Boss." Can I go back to the base directly? She didn't mean anything else. She just wanted to explain the current situation. It seemed like there was no need for her to go back to his place. Previously, she was recuperating from her injuries and avoiding the eyes of those people in the military. But now that things had been resolved, she shouldn't go back to his place with him. Li Nanheng paused, turned around, looked down at her, narrowed his eyes, and said in a deep voice, which was completely different from when he was talking to Dr. Qin at the table. There are wolves and beasts in my place. Why are you so anxious to leave? Feng Ling lowered her head and did not speak. Feng Ling, he said lightly, you know very well why I'm doing my best to protect you. I've already expressed it to you. It's up to you whether you accept it or not, but now things have developed to this point. It doesn't matter whether you live in my place for a day or a month. The only thing you can't cross is the line in your heart. Besides, even if you live in my place, what did I do to you or what did I say to make you want to hide back to the base? I don't like to do useless work or waste unnecessary enthusiasm. If you insist on keeping a distance from me, it's fine. You can deal with the affairs of the military yourself. In the future, you don't have to ask me for anything. Just pretend that these days didn't happen. You can do whatever you want to do alone. Feng Ling paused. Boss, the man pinched her chin and bent down beside her face. His warm breath landed on her cheek. I treat you as my woman, which is why I care about you. If you're nothing, why should I go through so much effort to snatch you back? You're a person who's about to die, and... Feng Ling's hands immediately clenched into fists, and she said in a muffled voice, "Boss, you're threatening me. You think I have no one to rely on since I was a child? I really can't bear to leave 11 base, can I?" The man raised his hand and gently patted her face, smiling. "And, if you're not convinced, you can find someone stronger than me to rely on." With that, the man's tall and straight body directly turned around, his long legs striding forward as if he was going to return to the car alone. Feng Ling stood where she was and watched his footsteps. For some reason, a certain line of defense in her heart suddenly collapsed, causing all the calmness and reason she wanted to maintain to dissipate in an instant. She suddenly trotted to catch up with him until she reached the car door. Before the man got into the car, she opened the door of the front passenger seat and sat in the car. After the man got into the car, he turned to look at her. "Are you going back to the base? Do you want me to send you back?" The corner of Feng Ling's mouth twitched. "I'll go back to the condo with you." Li Nanheng casually placed one hand on the steering wheel and looked at her with a sneer. "Do you know what it means to go back to the condo with me at this time?" Feng Ling didn't understand. "It means that boss has protected me now. From now on, whatever boss says, I dare not go west. If you say west, I dare not go east. If you say west, I dare not go east. If you ask me to serve tea, I will never pour water." Li Nanheng was not satisfied with this answer. "If I ask you to warm the bed, you'll warm the bed for me?" After a long while, Feng Ling looked at him in confusion. "But boss, I'm a man." Li Nanheng looked at her meaningfully. "Why can't a man warm the bed? The weather has been so cold recently. After taking a shower and lying on the bed, it's freezing. What do you think I mean by warming the bed?" Feng Ling, however, when she returned to the condo, Feng Ling suddenly ran to the 24-hour convenience store downstairs. Li Nanheng didn't know what she was going to buy. After waiting for a while, he saw Feng Ling run out with a few hot water bags. "Boss, these things should be the best for warming the bed." Li Nanheng, looking at the hot water bags in her arms, the man expressionlessly raised his hand and pressed it against her head. Without saying a word, he pressed her into the door of the apartment building. Without another word, he directly carried her into the elevator. Feng Ling staggered with the hot water bags in her arms. After entering the elevator, she wanted to get up, but the man directly held her in his arms. Li Nanheng lowered his head and pressed his strong masculine breath against her forehead. He said hoarsely, "Do you think I'm so easy to fool?" It was a pun, but she only thought he was talking about the hot water bags. When the man spoke, his breath blew against the wound on her forehead. It didn't hurt, but it was so hot that she trembled all over. Chapter 951. Feng Ling staggered all the way back home. Even when she pressed the password, she could feel how tight the man's hand was around her waist. It was as though if she dared to escape in the next second, he would dare to cripple her right now. Did she dare to run? No, she didn't dare. The door opened. Feng Ling was about to speak, but the man pushed her in without saying a word. It was already evening outside. Although the room was not so dark that she couldn't see her fingers, it was so dark that she could barely see anything. She was pushed against the wall by the man. As the door was slammed shut with a bang. Before Feng Ling could speak, the man's sudden kiss had already pressed her against the wall with an irresistible force. When Feng Ling subconsciously tried to push him away, her hands were pressed against the wall by his sides and she could not move at all. Feng Ling struggled a few times but failed to break free. Her body was tense and she wanted to turn her head away, but the man pressed her firmly against the wall with his height and physical strength. This kiss was not gentle at all. It almost tore at her, and the pain reminded her of the man's unhappy mood outside. Was he still angry? He was angry at her for wanting to go forward and die bravely just now. Lee. Feng Ling finally took the opportunity to speak when he slightly turned his head away, but her voice suddenly turned into a soft moan because of the man's next action. He let go of her lips but turned to attack her sensitive ears. She trembled all over. Even though her lips were already free, they were trembling so much that she could barely make a sound. What do you want to say? Li Nanheng's voice was low and hoarse against her ear. Now that you dare to come back with me, you should know what will happen. No matter if you are a man or a woman, wolf or a human, from now on, you are mine, understand? Feng Ling didn't know if it was because of the man's hot breath in her ear or because of his words, but her body trembled even more violently. Boss, is this considered a robbery? She barely found her voice. When the man's kiss turned to attack the sensitive parts of her ears and neck, she asked him in a hoarse voice. However, her hands were no longer resisting, but tightly pressed against the wall, not knowing what to do. Hearing her words, the man paused. She seemed to hear a chuckle coming from his chest. I'm a straightforward person. If I like you, I like you. Why can't I say it? No, but boss, I... The man's kiss landed on her again. His heavy breath, filled with the scent of male hormones, blew between her nose. He abruptly raised his hand to grab her hand, which was pressed against the wall, and pulled it down his body. Feng Ling instantly understood what he meant. This was not the first time. She subconsciously tried to shrink back, but the man firmly pulled her over. She wanted to pull away a few times, but how could she really break free from the man's hand? He didn't seem to be exerting much force, but no matter how hard she tried, her hand remained firmly in his palm. Feng Ling had no choice. Boss, let go of my hand. The man ignored her and pressed her hand down his body. Boss, I know you helped me this time. In the future, I can go up the mountain or down the sea of fire in the base, but you, don't. He still didn't respond. He even pulled her hand harder and pressed it down more firmly. Feng Ling was a little anxious and struggled. Li Nanheng, the man raised his eyebrows slightly and whispered hoarsely against her lips, there is no lack of people in 11 base who are willing to risk their lives, but I lack you. Behave, okay? Behave. This man was always so domineering as if it was a matter of course even though he was clearly taking it from her. A man flirted with another man so fearlessly. This was how young Master Li, who grew up under the crutches of the Li family's elders, seduced others. Wasn't he afraid that the elders of the Li family would really explode with anger? She was a man. At least now she was a man. She didn't even drink, and she didn't look as unconscious as last time on the snow mountain. How could he? How could he? Was it hard to treat her like any other member of the base? She went back to the apartment with him because she didn't want to go back so early to face the rumors in the base. Most importantly, because he was angry just now, she wanted to play along with his temper and didn't want to offend him. But who would have thought that when he said to go back to the apartment, it would be like this? The breath on her lips was taken away again. When Feng Ling was kissed until her breathing was disordered and she saw stars, the man pressed her hand under his body. There was an obvious change in his body, but he didn't let her move her hand away and still imprisoned her on the wall. He lowered his eyes to look at her somewhat confused and moist eyes, lowered his forehead against hers, and said hoarsely, "Look at your submissive look, I really want to peel you off." Feng Ling's gaze faltered. Then she heard the man ask in a low voice by her ear, "Feng Ling, let me ask you, if another man pressed you here and treated you like this, would you still be as reluctant as you are now, or would you want to kill him like you did to the commander?" Feng Ling had never thought about this question, nor had she ever compared it. But at this moment, because of the man's words, her heart skipped a beat. She already wanted to kill a fat commander because of his verbal insult. If other men dared to treat her like this, she didn't know how many times they would have died in front of her. So, Li Nanheng was indeed special. Seeing that the girl was even more confused, an imperceptible smile flashed across Li Nanheng's lips. He lowered his head slightly and said lightly, "You dare to say such words? Do you know what a mountain of knives and a sea of fire is? Now there is a sea of fire for you to go up. Do you dare?" Feng Ling came back to herself and looked a little confused. "What sea of fire?" The man pointed at her and said meaningfully, "Don't you want to thank me for my sincerity? What do you think you should do now?" Feng Ling, what sincerity? He raised his eyebrows and didn't speak, but his eyes were self-explanatory. Feng Ling looked at him and then lowered her head to look at the place where her hand was placed. She immediately blushed. "Li Nanheng, you're too much." He looked at her with a faint smile in his deep and boundless eyes, as if waiting for her to take the initiative. Chapter 952. Feng Ling pursed her lips. Being stared at by the man, she began to feel uncomfortable. The point was that being pressed against the wall by the man like this, she couldn't help but wonder if her chest cloth was wrapped tightly. Would he suspect that her chest was different? Although the difference was not obvious, he would definitely notice it after a long time. Feng Ling had always been at a disadvantage in front of this man, and she didn't know why he always took advantage of her. Anyway, it wasn't the first time, and she had already been touched by him. Although he didn't remember, after weighing the pros and cons, it didn't seem to be good for her to resist now. Li Nanheng looked at her thoughtful expression unruffled. Feng Ling couldn't hold it in anymore. Being pressed against the wall like this, she couldn't take any advantage in the end, so she might as well take the initiative. Anyway, it had already been like this, thus, in the next moment, her hand, which was pressed there by him, suddenly moved. The man frowned and watched her suddenly take the initiative. I don't know how to." Feng Ling looked up at him. When she said this, her face was so hot that it could almost cook an egg. The man's eyes were instantly filled with darkness, as though a vortex could suck her in. He smiled in a good mood. "I'll teach you." When she came out of the bathroom, Feng Ling quickly tidied up her clothes and pulled them up, trying to hide the kiss marks on her neck. Her hands were also extremely sore. She found that doing this kind of thing was more tiring than doing physical training on the training ground for several hours. More importantly, it really broke through a certain line of defense in her heart. She had pretended to be a man for so long, but she never knew that there was such a big difference between a man's body and a woman's body. Especially some changes when doing that kind of thing, she almost couldn't hold it with one hand. How on earth did she bear that night on the snow mountain? No wonder it hurt so much that she didn't want to get out of bed for several days. When she was helping him in the bathroom, he didn't take off her clothes. Instead, he held her in his arms and kissed her ear. She even felt that when he was holding her, his body became more and more tense, and his arms tightened, almost crushing her. Later, Li Nanheng groaned and bit her ear, and his hoarse breathing made her cheeks hot. In the end, the man almost couldn't help kissing her, kept lowering his head, and almost couldn't help pulling her buttons, but in the end, he forced himself not to do so and just left traces on her neck. Then Feng Ling didn't know how she walked out. But her hands were sore, her face was hot, and her palms were burning. At this moment, the sound of water came from the bathroom behind her. Feng Ling quickly returned to the bedroom and locked the door. While Li Nanheng was not coming over for the time being, she quickly took a shower, wrapped the cloth around her, put on her clothes, and lay on the bed. However, when she closed her eyes, the scene of the man holding her tightly in his arms and his body tensed up kept appearing. Feng Ling suddenly pulled the quilt and covered her face with it. After a while, she turned over on the bed, grabbed the pillow, and pressed it against her head. Just this once. Next time, she definitely wouldn't do such a thing. The next day, Feng Ling almost couldn't sleep at night. As long as she closed her eyes, she would look like a man. She didn't fall asleep until dawn, so she slept until noon. She thought that Li Nanheng didn't come in to look for her, so she slept inexplicably well. She originally thought that it was fatigue caused by her heart and hands. However, the moment she woke up and was about to open her eyes, she suddenly felt an abnormality in her body. In an instant, she realized what was going on. She opened her eyes abruptly and saw the man's cold face magnifying in front of her. Li Nanheng was clearly still asleep, and the point was that he was sleeping on her bed, holding her in his arms. Feng Ling's head was about to explode. She was about to move, but her shoulders only moved slightly when the man suddenly pulled her into his arms. At the same time, the man pressed his lips against her forehead and said in a low, husky voice, "There's nothing much to do today. Sleep a little more, be good." Feng Ling's body instantly stiffened. As if feeling her stiffness, the man suddenly lowered the kiss on her forehead and landed on her lips before she could react. It was such a light peck, as though comforting, and then he continued to hold her with his eyes closed, saying, "Go back to sleep." When did he come in? She went to sleep after taking a shower yesterday. She clearly remembered locking the bedroom door. But, after all, this apartment was his. There must be a spare key for every room. Things like door locks were usually used to prevent gentlemen but not villains, and Li Nanheng was neither a gentleman nor a villain. He was just so overbearing. Anyway, this place was his. As long as he wanted to come in, no matter how many times she locked the door, it would be unimpeded for him. Feng Ling abruptly got up, raised her hand to push his hand away from her waist, and turned to get off the bed. Li Nanheng opened his sleepy eyes and looked at her. Seeing that Feng Ling got off the bed and was about to go out, the man frowned and asked hoarsely, "Where are you going?" "Back to the base." Feng Ling did not look back. She did not even plan to wash up and was about to leave. Li Nanheng was about to lie back when he suddenly frowned, thinking that he had heard wrong. A few seconds later, he suddenly opened his eyes, got up, and got off the bed. He rushed to the living room and saw that Feng Ling had already picked up her coat and was about to put on her shoes. He grabbed her wrist and pulled her back, holding her in his arms and looking down at her. "Why are you in a hurry to go back?" Feng Ling had already regretted agreeing to help him last night. Now when she opened her eyes, she found that she was lying in his arms, sharing the same bed, and even their posture was ambiguous as if they had done something last night. This was definitely beyond her psychological preparation and expectation. "The matter has been resolved. I should go back to the base to receive my punishment. Besides, I have already thanked boss last night. I think the way I did it is very sincere," Feng Ling said with a straight face. "So I should go back now." Li Nanheng looked down at her, put his arm around her waist, and said lightly, "It will take a few days to deal with it. I have handed it over to the elders. You don't have to worry so much. Just wait for the result. You don't have to go back now." "I'd better go back. I didn't allow you to go back. Do you think you can step into 11 base?" Chapter 953. Hearing his words, Feng Ling paused, looked up at him, or even glared at him. She must have been suppressing her temper because of what happened last night. Originally, he wanted to use force, but seeing her expression, he knew he couldn't keep suppressing her, so he simply said in a low voice, "For so many years, there is no normal place except 11 base where you have lived. Now that you finally have some peaceful and normal days, can't you enjoy them for a few more days? I'm used to it." She lowered her eyes and struggled in his arms. "Let go of me. No, come back with me. We haven't eaten yet. The man took her to the sofa, pressed her down on the sofa, picked up his cell phone to check the time, and said, "What do you want to eat?" "I don't think the food in the base's canteen is as good as the food you make or the takeout I eat these days." Fong Ling had no desire to live now and just wanted to leave as soon as possible. She not only helped him this and that, but also slept with him so openly. What was this? The man lowered his eyes to look at her, bent down to look at her with displeasure, raised his hand to pinch her chin, bent down to her face, and his warm breath sprinkled on her skin. "Then go out to eat." Fong Ling raised her eyes. "Li Nanheng, I've thanked you and done what you asked me to do. What else do you want?" What a stubborn little girl. With such a straightforward temper, it was really fortunate that he was patient enough with her. Otherwise, who knew how angry he would be one day? He would really throw her on the bed and eat her alive. Although she helped him with her hand last night, it didn't mean that he was satisfied. She went back to her room to sleep, and he took a cold shower in the bathroom for a long time. He didn't sleep much all night. In the early morning, he came to her room and held her in his arms, and then he fell asleep. However, after the little girl woke up, she turned her back on him. Yesterday, when he held her in his arms and kissed her in the bathroom, she didn't dare to move. "Nothing. It's nothing. I helped you solve this problem. Do you think the reward last night is enough?" The man didn't explain more but followed her angry words. "Go out to eat with me first. It's already noon. Come with me to buy some things in the afternoon. It depends on your performance in the next 2 days. If you perform well, you can go back to the base." Fong Ling instantly stared at him as though she was looking at a lunatic. "Why should I accompany you to eat and shop with you?" The man frowned. "Why do you think so?" "Why?" The man suddenly smiled evilly. He raised her hand to his lips and seemed to be about to kiss it. Fong Ling was about to withdraw her hand, but the man suddenly pressed her hand against his chest and kissed her lips accurately. The man pressed Fong Ling against the back of the sofa and kissed her harshly several times. When she raised her hands and feet to push and kick him, the man curved his lips into a smile and held her hand to kiss it. "It's probably because it's rare for me to go out for a stroll and I lack a little attendant by my side. You're just right." Fong Ling, she pushed the man away. At this time, the man did let go of her and was easily pushed away. Li Nanheng took a few steps back and looked at Fong Ling, who was angry but couldn't shout at him because of various things. She looked like a kitten holding its sharp claws but hesitating whether to scratch him or not. His heart itched. He wanted to kiss her again, but Fong Ling had already got up and walked quickly back to the bedroom. "What are you going to do?" the man asked with a smile. Fong Ling didn't look back and answered grumpily, "Wash my face and brush my teeth. Clean up and go be an attendant." The smile on Li Nanheng's lips instantly widened. He walked over and stood in front of the bedroom door, watching Fong Ling, who had entered the bathroom and was about to brush her teeth. Fong Ling had a hidden temper in her bones, but she was very tolerant, such as now. But if other men dared to treat her like this, they would probably get the same result as the fat commander. After all, her heart was still with him, but the girl obviously didn't understand these feelings. It didn't matter that she didn't understand. He could teach her slowly. It didn't matter that she hadn't lived a normal life since she was a child. He could slowly accompany her to experience it. His little girl, no matter whether she had short hair or long hair, no matter whether she was pretending to be a man or a woman, since she had compromised under her chest cloth, he had to admit defeat. He had never been patient in his life, but at this moment, he used all his patience on her. Fong Ling was taken to eat by Li Nanheng, and it was Western food. He asked her to order, but she didn't know what was delicious, so she didn't order anything and just let him order. However, Li Nanheng ordered the food that the two girls were eating at the next table and added various blueberry-flavored desserts. Feng Ling ate until she was full. When she left the Western restaurant, although she didn't want to talk to him, she still asked, "Boss, why did you bring me to eat Western food? From today onwards, before we return to the base, we will change the cuisine of different countries for every meal and let you taste every taste." Feng Ling. Did he think she was a pig? After the meal, they passed by the largest amusement park in Los Angeles. Li Nanheng asked her if she wanted to go in. Feng Ling glanced inside and shook her head. She was not interested in these things, but the man still took her in and walked around. Although she didn't want to play any games, in the end, the man still bought a Disney hairpin and forced it on her head. This is what women wear. Feng Ling felt helpless about the pair of Mickeys on her head. Li Nanheng pointed to a young couple not far away. "Look at them. Don't men wear it too?" Feng Ling looked at the boy who was only about 17 or 18 years old and his girlfriend. The two of them were smiling sweetly and sharing the same Mickey-shaped ice cream. She quickly looked away and no longer said anything about this matter, in case Li Nanheng continued to follow suit. After leaving the amusement park, she drove to the business street. In the mall, Li Nanheng asked her to accompany him to buy things, but she didn't know what was wrong with this man. Whenever they passed by a good-looking women's clothing store, he would stop outside for a moment and then turn back to ask her, "Which one do you like?" Feng Ling looked at the various beautiful women's clothing styles and glanced at him strangely. "Boss, are you going to buy clothes for your girlfriend? You shouldn't ask me. I don't have any aesthetic standards for women." The man continued to walk forward and casually said, "Then try to find a woman's aesthetic standards." Feng Ling. Chapter 954. She was a man. Why was she looking for a woman's aesthetic? Why was it so strange? Feng Ling followed Li Nanheng thoughtfully, watching his back in front of her. Did he know she was a woman? But it shouldn't be. He hadn't found out. She didn't even take off her clothes. He was just suspicious before, but hadn't this suspicion been dispelled? Li Nanheng took her around the business street for the whole afternoon and left in the evening. Feng Ling was already carrying a lot of things in her hands, all kinds of clothes, supplies, shoes, and some things that she didn't think were necessary. She even bought skincare products. Li Nanheng said he wanted to buy things, but it seemed that everything was double. The only thing that was consistent with his previous statement was that she was indeed the one who carried everything from the back, just like a little follower. She finally followed him back to the car. The man opened the trunk of the car and looked back at her, who was carrying the things with great difficulty but refused to ask for his help. He smiled faintly. "Is it very heavy?" "No." Feng Ling walked forward stubbornly and put the things in her hands into the trunk one by one. Li Nanheng stood on the side with his arms crossed, watching all her movements, and the smile on his lips grew wider and wider. It was already dark in Los Angeles, and there were only the two of them in the dark parking lot with the cold wind blowing. After putting everything in place, Feng Ling was about to get into the car, when the man suddenly held her hand and said lightly above her head, "All right, we can go to the movies." With that, he took her in the direction of the largest cinema on this business street. Feng Ling understood what was going on and was pulled forward. When she came back to herself, she asked slowly, "Watch a movie?" "What movie? What movie do you want to watch?" "I rarely go to places like the cinema. I'll just look around and choose a movie I like," the man said matter-of-factly. After being held by him for a few steps, Feng Ling rushed to withdraw her hand. However, when she tried to pull her hand out, the man directly pulled her to his side and raised his arm to hold her waist. As he walked, he spoke calmly and lowly, "Don't move. Be good. Feng Ling. Boss, I don't want to watch a movie. I'd better go back. If I want you to watch a movie, go obediently, and... The man looked down at her. You should experience everything while you're young. Just treat it as accompanying me. I haven't been there either. I'm very young. Feng Ling pursed her lips. I'm not even 18 yet. Li Nanheng immediately glanced at her coldly. Are you saying I'm old? No, how can boss be old? Even if you're over 40, you'll still be a flower on a high mountain. You won't be old. Li Nanheng sneered. As he walked with her in his arms, he raised his hand and rubbed her head. Little thing, you've learned to be glib. Ling, she really couldn't accept the word little thing. But no matter how hard she tried, she was still brought into the cinema by Li Nanheng. Most of the people who came here were also young people. It seemed that people in every country had popcorn in the cinema. Li Nanheng also bought a large bucket of popcorn and stuffed it into Feng Ling's mouth. Feng Ling had no choice but to follow him in with a large bucket of popcorn. After sitting down in the cinema, she found out that Li Nanheng had actually chosen a romance film that was not very popular in the United States. Usually, Hollywood films or some world-famous and popular films were more popular. This kind of romance film was not very popular in the United States. When she sat down, the seats next to her were empty. Even until the beginning, they were still empty. There were only a few young couples sitting in 2s and 3s in the first few rows, but they weren't here to watch a movie. Anyway, in a cinema in America, in a place with a slightly quieter atmosphere, some daring young men and women would directly feel it here. The only thing lacking was to directly applaud for love here. By the time the film was halfway through, the young couples in the front were already hugging and kissing each other on the man's lap. Feng Ling had been holding the popcorn in her arms. Li Nanheng was not very interested in this kind of film. He turned to look at the girl next to him, only to see that she was eating popcorn while watching the film. She seemed very interested. When the male and female leads in the film had to be separated for a long time because of something, the two of them madly hugged and kissed each other, took off their clothes, and so on. The young couples in the first few rows had already become more and more passionate. Li Nanheng glanced at the girl next to him. The girl's eyes were closed and her head was leaning against the back of the chair. He had thought that he would take her to watch this kind of romance film to enlighten her. But she actually fell asleep. Li Nanheng, at the end of the film, Feng Ling felt the surrounding lights turn on. She instinctively opened her eyes and turned to see that Li Nanheng looked very unhappy. She didn't know if it was because of her, but she only said, "Can we go back now?" "Boss? Where do you want to go?" the man asked sternly. "I don't want to go anywhere. I just want to go home." "Go home." Hearing these two words, Li Nanheng's unhappy mood was swept away. He glanced at her again. "And go back to our home." Feng Ling had just woken up and didn't understand the meaning behind his words. She instinctively nodded and grunted. She got up and was about to leave. Then she paused and looked at him with the popcorn in her arms. "What about this popcorn? Go outside the theater and put it next to a beggar." "Okay." The car drove back to the apartment. Feng Ling had just gotten out of the car and was about to take something from the trunk when she suddenly felt an unfriendly gaze. She paused and turned back to see that Feng Mingzhu had been waiting for a long time by a car not far away. She didn't know how long she had been waiting there. The moment she saw Feng Mingzhu, the expression on Feng Ling's face was not very happy. She didn't know why she offended her, but whenever they met, nothing happy would happen. Although she never minded it too much, it was really annoying that this Feng Mingzhu always deliberately appeared like this. Feng Ling didn't speak but just took something from the trunk in the back and said, "Boss, I'll go up first." However, before she left, her arm was held by someone. "Stand here and wait. Don't you have something to say?" "There's nothing to say. Besides, you're not an outsider. There's no need to leave." Stand still." The man coldly glanced at her. Feng Ling hesitated. Although she didn't leave, she didn't look at Feng Mingzhu again. Instead, she simply tidied up the things in the trunk. Chapter 955. "Didn't I tell you not to look for me if there's nothing important?" Li Nanheng's voice rang behind her, carrying a hint of coldness and alienation. Feng Mingzhu moved her eyes away from Feng Ling and turned to look at Li Nanheng. "Nanheng, my father and grandfather want to see you." She had persisted for so long, but it was all for naught. She really couldn't accept such an outcome. Even if she called for help, she couldn't just give up like this. However, the man only responded with two emotionless words, "No." Feng Mingzhu looked at him in disbelief. "You've repeatedly rejected the Feng family and used my sister's cenotaph as a reason to push me so far away. Right now, they just want to have a meal with you. After all, the death of the military commander is such a big matter, and the Feng family has been involved recently. You can't be like this." Li Nanheng's eyes were cold and without any hesitation. "Tell them to go to the Li family to look for the elders." "With the Li family's grandfather around, do I still need to show up?" But, Li Nanheng turned back, picked up the things that had been arranged in the car with one hand, and held Feng Ling's hand with the other. He walked past Feng Mingzhu and went straight to the apartment building. The tall black Hummer reflected the early winter sunlight. Feng Mingzhu stood on the side and looked back at him, only to see the man holding Feng Ling's hand naturally and gentlemanly. The two of them were carrying a lot of things in their other hands, which seemed to be trophies that had been out for a day. They were clearly two men, but they inexplicably made Feng Mingzhu feel uncomfortable. She was so petite and was treated like this by Li Nanheng. What on earth was this? Was he a man or a woman? At this moment, Feng Mingzhu couldn't help but recall the stories of Hua Mulan that her grandfather told her when she was young. Although the stories were just stories, in this world, anything could happen. Either this Feng Ling was actually a woman or Li Nanheng liked men. But Li Nanheng seemed to have no problem with his sexual orientation. The most likely possibility was that Feng Ling was a woman. Feng Mingzhu looked in that direction for a long time, frowned, and suddenly picked up her phone to dial a number. The two had walked some distance away and entered the apartment building. They then walked into the elevator. It was quiet in the elevator. Feng Ling looked at the things in her hands and then at the changing numbers on the elevator. She seemed to be lost in thought. The man's deep voice broke the almost stiff silence. "Are you unhappy?" Feng Ling came back to herself, retracted her gaze, and said in a low voice, "No." He stated mildly, "You don't like Feng Mingzhu." She looked at him in amusement. "Should I like her?" "Whether you like her or not has nothing to do with me, but there are always reasons to hate someone." Li Nanheng was a man who didn't take things too seriously. He didn't care much about Feng Mingzhu's matters and didn't like women complaining endlessly by his ears. However, he didn't like how Feng Ling kept quiet and didn't explain anything. She never complained. He would rather she told him her thoughts occasionally. Why couldn't she learn to be as long-winded and talkative as other women? Feng Ling didn't explain but continued to watch the changing numbers on the elevator in silence. She did want to ask about Feng Mingzhu. For example, if she and Li Nanheng weren't engaged, why did Feng Mingzhu say that she was his fiancée? After all, she was the eldest daughter of the Feng family. If there was no reason, she definitely wouldn't make up such a rumor. But even if she wanted to ask, she didn't know how. When the elevator stopped on the 10th floor, the two walked out. Li Nanheng went to open the door, and Feng Ling walked behind him. She thought for a moment and asked the simplest question, "Boss, have you known Miss Feng for a long time?" I saw her when I was a child. It seems that she really likes you." She had heard their previous conversation. Later, when she saw Feng Mingzhu's perseverance, it was not difficult to see how infatuated Feng Mingzhu was with him. To be able to make the eldest daughter of such a family so infatuated, it could be seen that something very romantic must have happened between the two of them or something she couldn't imagine. At this time, Li Nanheng glanced at her, walked in, and put down the things in his hands without speaking. Feng Ling also put down the things. Suddenly, she didn't want to talk anymore and was about to walk in. Seeing her silent back, Li Nanheng said lightly in a low voice, "The Li family and the Feng family are aristocratic families. Although we have known each other since we were young, the number of times I have seen Feng Mingzhu can be counted with 5 fingers. The time we have spent together since we were young is less than a few hours, not even as long as the time I spent holding you to sleep last night." Feng Ling's footsteps paused. The man continued in an orderly voice, "She wants to marry me, but it doesn't mean that I want to marry her. You have to ask about these things later. You don't have to listen to what she says. It's best if you don't even see her again. Feng Ling, I don't think I will have a chance to see her again after returning to the base." She shifted her feet, thought for a moment, and said, "Boss, the elders of the Li family said that although they won't pursue that matter, they still have to receive the punishment that should be received. Has the higher-ups made any decision? What kind of punishment should I receive?" "You will only receive a more difficult task than the Rogers Pass. It won't be easier. Just wait patiently." "Why are you in such a hurry to receive the punishment?" Feng Ling didn't react for a moment and asked blankly, "Are you going to infiltrate the terrorist camp as a spy?" The man sat on the sofa, holding the phone with his well-defined fingers. He glanced at the message he had just received and turned his head to glance at her indifferently. "No, you're too straightforward and not tactful enough to be a spy. You can't count on this kind of thing." Feng Ling inexplicably read from his indifferent tone that he should already know what punishment she would face, but he didn't say it. As long as she was not a spy, she didn't care about anything else. At night, Feng Ling had nothing to do, so she went to the kitchen to cook 2 bowls of noodles. After all, she didn't know how to cook other things, but she could still cook noodles. Although the taste was a little unsatisfactory, at least it was edible. She sent the cooked noodles into the study. At this time, Li Nanheng got up to answer the phone. He looked back and saw that she had entered the study. Seeing the bowl in her hand, he signaled her to come in and put it on the table. Feng Ling walked in and put the bowl down, but the man had already gone out to answer the phone. She looked down at the computer and some documents on the desk, and then saw several pages of pure English documents with Li Nanheng's signature. Chapter 956. The man's handwriting was vigorous and powerful. He didn't look like the boss of a base who had been playing with guns and sticks for so many years. Instead, he looked like a scholar or a business elite. When Feng Ling was a child, she learned some things from the mafia. There was a Chinese man who would teach her how to read and some simple knowledge. Later, when she was in the orphanage, she occasionally attended classes, but she didn't learn much. She wasn't very cooperative. After arriving at the base, Han Jin introduced her to a cultural teacher in the base and specially arranged some courses for her. In addition to training, he would teach her a lot of things. As time went by, Feng Ling gradually made up for a lot of knowledge that she had missed when she was a child. There were many young people who entered the base at a very young age, so there would be special cultural teachers to teach them. Feng Ling was also the best in this aspect and was most liked by the teachers. There were not only boorish men in the base, but even boorish men would not be illiterate. The rules in the base were quite good. At least, Feng Ling could read these Chinese and English clearly. Looking at the signature Li Nanheng signed, whether it was Chinese or English, it was very beautiful. What are you looking at? Li Nanheng hung up the phone and came back. When he entered the study, he saw that Feng Ling was flipping through those documents. Feng Ling put down the documents and turned back to look at the man in home clothes. I just glanced at them casually. There shouldn't be a problem, right? She didn't see any secrets that she couldn't see, so her expression was very calm. It's nothing, but what were you looking at so seriously just now? When the man approached, Feng Ling momentarily forgot to avoid him. When she was enveloped by the man's aura, and when he suddenly leaned forward, she abruptly staggered backward and leaned against the edge of the table. She rushed to support herself with her hands on the edge of the table and tried her best to move backward to avoid the man's approaching face. Seeing that she was avoiding him, Li Nanheng didn't say much, but he didn't let her go either. He casually put his hands on both sides of her body, as if inadvertently pressing them against her hands, and lowered his eyes to look at her carefully avoiding him. Seeing that she really couldn't avoid him, Feng Ling looked away and said, "No, I didn't see anything. I just saw that your handwriting is very beautiful, boss." Li Nanheng lowered his head to look at the documents in her hand. "Really? N." She dragged out her last syllable because of this posture. "I just suddenly remembered that, boss, you entered the base when you were young. Did you also learn your cultural classes in the base?" Li Nanheng looked at her. "Why? You don't know anything about what I've learned and experienced. Do you want to find out?" Feng Ling pursed her lips. "No. Do you think I've been living in the base since I was a child and have no culture?" The man seemed to let out a laugh from his nose. It was very deep, but strangely, it made her heart tremble a few times. "I didn't say that." As Feng Ling explained, she raised her hand to push him away. However, the moment her hand left the table, the man took advantage of her loss of support to lower his head. She was startled and rushed to dodge, but she was still kissed on the lips by the man. One kiss was not enough. When she glared at him angrily, his thin lips curved slightly and he leaned down to kiss her again. When he kissed Feng Ling from leaning against the table to sitting on the table, the man finally restrained his desire. He raised his hand to hold her chin and looked directly at her misty and watery eyes. Seeing that she was already used to being kissed and was no longer so obviously at a loss, he smiled slightly and said hoarsely, "Although I spent a lot of time in the base, the Li family still had to be handed over to me. Even if I didn't want to learn, the elders wouldn't let me go. At the age of 17, I was forced to obtain a double degree in business administration and finance from Stanford. As for why I never told you, it was because the base didn't need these things. Every day, I brandished a gun and a stick. There was no need to show off these things in front of you, but I really didn't expect you to always treat me as illiterate." "Feng Ling, I didn't, you." As soon as she spoke, she was abruptly kissed by the man again. These two kisses were not as fierce and almost crazy as before. Instead, they were so warm that she almost forgot to resist. She just stiffly allowed him to hold her. It was not until the man opened her teeth and the tip of their tongues intertwined that she suddenly came back to herself. However, at this time, even if she wanted to retreat, she couldn't because she was already sitting on the desk. The man held her like this, holding her chin with his hand, not giving her any room to escape. After kissing for a while, when Feng Ling completely gave up struggling, she remained motionless and allowed him to kiss her. However, because of her docile appearance, the man almost couldn't restrain himself. After slightly panting against her lips, he tilted his head and smiled, then glanced at the bowl of noodles she had placed on the table. What, you know how to cook? Feng Ling, I just cooked a bowl of noodles. I don't know if it's delicious. And, I'm not picky. It's fine as long as it's cooked. Feng Ling, Li Nanheng still had things to do. He had just received a call, and Feng Ling finally took the opportunity to escape from the study. Otherwise, she felt that she might have been touched by him on the table in the study. After returning to the room, she lay on the bed. After lying down for a while, she sat up again. This repeated for a long time. Suddenly, she got up and went straight into the bathroom. When taking a shower, she turned the dressing mirror facing the bathroom door to face herself standing under the shower. In the mirror, the young woman's figure was slender, perfect, and white and tender. In the past, Feng Ling didn't have any concept of this, but recently, she often went out and saw many girls. Although she didn't pay special attention, she found that even though she trained in the wind and sun every day, her skin seemed to be much better than theirs. Especially her body, which was often covered in clothes like this, not showing at all. It was even more white and tender as though it could be broken with a pinch. Man or woman? As a woman, she couldn't continue to stay in the base. Even if she had savings in her card and such an apartment downstairs under her name, even if she left the base, she wouldn't starve to death and could still live a good life. But she knew that she didn't want to leave the base. For no reason, she just didn't want to leave. But was she going to continue pretending to be a man like this? She recalled the lingering and pitiful kiss in the study. She didn't know if it was because of herself or because of the water flowing out of the shower, but her face became hotter and hotter. Feng Ling took a long shower and stood under the water for a long time. The sound of the water splashing did not pay much attention to the movements outside. By the time she sensed someone approaching from outside the bathroom door had already been pulled open. Chapter 957. Feng Ling subconsciously raised her head. She didn't even have time to prepare herself before she saw the man's hand reach into the bathroom door. The girl stood naked in the water. She froze and didn't dare to move. In despair, she found that there was no place to hide. Just when Feng Ling was ready to be exposed, the man put a few new toiletries on the marble table in the bathroom. He didn't come in but said outside, "These are new. Use them if you like the smell. Put the old ones away or throw them away." With that, the man retracted his hand and closed the door. In less than a minute, he left just like that. From beginning to end, the man only came in with one arm. He didn't come in, nor did he stick his head in other words, he didn't find out. Feng Ling stood by the water and looked at the new bottles of toiletries. She was stunned for a long time before she slowly recovered and turned to look at the bathroom door that was closed again. When she woke up the next morning, Feng Ling felt the man's arm around her waist before she opened her eyes. It wasn't the first time she had woken up in his arms like this. This time, she wasn't as shocked as before, but she still stiffened slightly. However, the man tightened his grip around her waist. He patted her back gently as though he was comforting her or coaxing her to sleep. Feng Ling didn't move but looked out of the corner of her eyes at the sky outside the window. It was probably 9:00 now. If she didn't return to the base soon, she would be completely disrupted by this idle life. In the future, if she wanted to get up early on time, she would have to adjust for a long time. Being held in the man's arms and sleeping for a while, Feng Ling really couldn't fall asleep, so she pushed his hand away and got up. Li Nanheng opened his eyes. The Li family and the military have discussed the punishment measures. Do you want to listen? As soon as Feng Ling's feet touched the ground, she paused and looked back at him. What kind of punishment? Li Nanheng glanced at her, sat up on the bed, raised his hand, and casually tugged at his short hair. Seeing that his hair was slightly messy on the pillow, he knew that he slept well at her place last night. There's a world-famous snake valley in Cambodia. All kinds of ferocious and rare pythons and poisonous snakes live there all year round. Cambodian locals and snake trainers don't dare to approach it easily, but there's a minefield that was buried decades ago. You should know how the U.S. treats these small and medium-sized countries. They plan to build a base for the U.S. military nearby, but they need someone to clear the mines around the Snake Valley first. This is the mission I'm going to take. Fong Ling did not even frown. She stood by the bed and looked at him. Li Nanheng sat on the bed and looked at her indifferently. Whether it's clearing the mines or dealing with the snakes that may jump out at will, as long as you are not careful, you will either be buried in the Snake Valley or blown up above the minefield. This is the biggest concession the military can make, and the people of the United Nations have also agreed to this decision, but everyone knows that this is equivalent to letting you die in another way. Fong Ling looked very calm. Then I'll be careful. If I can come back alive, I'll come back alive. If I can't come back alive, at least I've lived for so many days. It's not a loss. Li Nanheng raised his eyebrows because of her calm and fearless expression. Can't you beg me? I can't beg, Fong Ling said calmly. I know that if I beg you now, you will find a way not to let me go to that kind of place. But now that the people in charge of the military and the United Nations have agreed to this decision, there is no need for you to intervene in this matter, boss. That day, the Li elders expressed their attitude very clearly. They don't want you to be stained with blood in this matter, and I think the same as them. Boss, you have done enough for me. It is an indisputable fact that I killed the military commander. This is like a murderer who has already been in prison, but you always try to help me avoid the punishment. In fact, this result is also very good. As long as I am careful and can come back alive, the whole thing can be completely over. Li Nanheng narrowed his eyes because of her words. Stained with blood. Fong Ling, from the beginning to now, what I've expressed is that I'm very willing. Your willingness doesn't mean that I'm willing. Boss, thank you for these days. I'll take the task of clearing the mines in Cambodia. Fong Ling was calm. When do they want me to leave? I'll go back to the base to pack up and prepare. Seeing that she began to be stubborn again, Li Nanheng's eyes suddenly became colder. Are you sure you want to go? I'm sure. The chance of coming back alive is very small. It doesn't matter. I have lived in the jungle since I was a child. I know all the snakes, insects, birds, and land animals very well. Others only have a 20% chance of surviving, but I will definitely have a 20% chance of surviving. Li Nanheng looked at her firm eyes, and after a moment of silence, he said indifferently, the base will send one more person to accompany you, but only one person. Who do you want to call to go with you? No, I'll go by myself. It's my own punishment mission. I don't need to implicate anyone. Looking at her expression, Li Nanheng didn't speak anymore but just looked at her. Fong Ling also looked at him. There was no fear in her eyes. She was so calm as if she was not facing the world-famous terrifying Snake Valley but just an ordinary shooting range. She knew that as long as she said one more word to Li Nanheng, even if it was not a request, even if it was just a sentence, saying that she didn't want to go, he would definitely find a way to let her stay, let her return to the base, and let her continue her peaceful life in the base. But she couldn't do this. Thousands of pairs of eyes in the base were watching, including the military, the United Nations, and the elders of the Li family. Boss Li had done too much for her. Now if she continued to let him help her, in the end, he would be completely implicated by her. Not only would his reputation be affected by those rumors, but the Leaf family would also put pressure on him. The relationship between him and the elders of the Leaf family had always been on the point of balance. If he was oppressed or negotiated various conditions because of her, she would really be in big trouble. She didn't think there was anything wrong with her killing. No one was wrong. Chapter 958. 11 Base. That night, Feng Ling returned to the base. She did not greet anyone, nor did she look for anyone to say a word. She only packed her things, various uniforms, and bulletproof vests, and left with her suitcase. She did not disturb anyone. Li Nanheng's car was outside. Seeing that he didn't go back to rest after returning to the base, Feng Ling stood outside the car and glanced at him, saying, "Boss, I'll go to the airport by myself. You don't have to send me." Li Nanheng casually put his arm outside the car window, took a look at her, withdrew his gaze, and said coldly, "Well, be careful. Have a nice trip." Since she decided to go to Cambodia, Li Nanheng hadn't said a word to persuade her to stay. Obviously, he had been familiar with her temper. Since she had made up her mind, she wouldn't go back on her words no matter what he said. Feng Ling nodded and said no more. She turned to the parking lot inside the base on the other side, drove an off-road vehicle, and left the base. Over 11 Base, the moon was bright and the stars were sparse. A car was parked in place, and the other car quickly drove out. 4 days later. Cambodia, Siem Reap. This was the 3rd day since Feng Ling arrived in Cambodia alone. Although she had the topographic map and the regional structure map of the Snake Valley handed over by the U.S. military, these maps were many years old, and many places were not clearly marked. It took her 3 days to familiarize herself with the nearby area. When she was on the plane, she hurriedly learned some simple Cambodian Khmer language from her mobile phone. She used her mobile phone to translate and learn about the situation here from the residents of the nearby villages. Although there was a minefield with many years of history nearby, because no one dared to walk here, the minefield had not exploded, and the mines buried below were very dense and very dangerous. But the more dangerous thing was the Snake Valley below, which was inhabited by various snakes all year round, which was very terrible. In order to avoid snakes, the villagers in the nearby villages habitually smeared all kinds of realgar powder and snake repellent powder on their bodies from the moment they were born. Otherwise, they might be bitten by poisonous snakes at any time when they were farming in the nearby fields. After a long time, the snakes didn't run into the village and only wandered around the Snake Valley. No one was willing to go there. It was said that the Snake Valley was at the top of the mountain in front of them. Feng Ling picked up the map the military gave her and glanced at it. The location the military wanted to make use of was the mountain in front of them. It was suitable for hiding and also suitable for making a temporary small military reserve base. Sure enough, he had given her a mission that she might not be able to return from. From the description of the residents, it seemed that as long as she went up that mountain, she would definitely not be able to come back alive. After leaving the village, she prepared everything and went up the mountain. The members of 11 Base had all received demoning training, so every step they took, they would carry a special demoning device in front of them, and every step they took was carefully taken. After spending a day and a night, they only cleared an area near the jungle on the top of the mountain. After making sure that there were no mines within 100 meters, Feng Ling went down the mountain, carried her tent up, and set up camp on the mountainside. There was still a lot of snake repellent powder in her suitcase that the villagers gave her. She scattered some around the tent and lay down in the tent to sleep. The temperature in Cambodia was so hot all year round. She only wore a thin t-shirt under her summer uniform. Lying in the tent like this, it was still very hot, but she would occasionally hear various very subtle movements coming from the direction of the jungle. If it were others, they might not know what the sound was. But she could hear it. It was some small beasts walking in the jungle at night. They came out to look for food. There were also some snakes crawling nearby, making very, very soft sounds. Feng Ling closed her eyes and suddenly felt as if she had returned to the age of 5, when she was a frightened and ignorant little girl, squatting in the cave every day. Because she didn't like to eat the meat brought back by the female wolf, she was so hungry that she ran out, climbed one tree after another, and picked fruit to eat. After another whole night, the demoning task continued. She was ready to live here alone for at least 4 or 5 months or even longer to clear mines on such a large mountain alone. She was wearing a pair of black military leather boots. With every step she took, she could feel that there were snakes nearby in the grass, which seemed to be disturbed and quickly crawled away. Feng Ling lowered her head to clear mines without changing her eyes, ignoring the various, small animals around her. Life on the mountain went on day after day, and there was no one here. Feng Ling didn't want to keep in touch with anyone in the base at this stage, so she didn't even charge her cell phone and just put it in her pocket. However, there was a fully charged power bank in her suitcase. If she had to use her cell phone one day, she could plug it in and use it. But it was only temporary. At this stage, she was in the stage of receiving punishment. She just wanted to do things here quietly. She was not particularly greedy for those modern communication and entertainment devices like TVs and mobile phones. Because she had lived in the jungle when she was a child, she didn't feel bored. Occasionally, she would go down the mountain to buy a few bottles of water, and occasionally go to those cars to buy spare things, and occasionally buy some food. If it weren't for the fact that most of the snakes near the Snake Valley were poisonous, she would probably be able to barbecue snake meat here. On the 15th day in Cambodia. Before she came to the base, the people in the hall said that she should keep in touch with the base, at least once every half a month, to report the demoning situation to the base. So after eating something in the evening, Feng Ling got into the tent, lay inside, plugged her cell phone into the power bank, and then checked the nearby network. The communication network of the mobile phone was good enough, but it was not as full as in the urban area. At least she could send some messages slowly. Just a few minutes after she turned on her cell phone, a lot of missed calls and messages popped up on her cell phone. It took a long time for her to calm down. She read the messages one by one. Many people had called her and sent her messages. Almost all of the people who were close to her in the base had called her. Because they couldn't get in touch with her, they sent her messages asking her why she went to Cambodia. They were all words of concern and worry. Feng Ling didn't expect that she could gain so many sincere friends in 11 base. She smiled slightly, but because there were too many messages, she didn't reply. When she turned to the top, she saw that just 2 days ago, Li Nanheng sent her a message. Turn it on. Chapter 959. Seeing these 2 words, Feng Ling's hand paused. She scrolled down and found that Li Nanheng had only sent her this text message 2 days ago, which was very close to now. She scrolled through the call records again. There was no call from him in the past few days, but 2 days ago, he called her more than a dozen times in a row and finally sent this text message. This seemed to be different from other people who called to ask about her situation. What's the matter? Feng Ling thought about it and replied to him, boss. After replying, the phone remained silent and there was no reply. Feng Ling held the phone and stared at the screen for a long time until suddenly there was a beep. She paused and saw the built-in GPS navigation on the phone lit up. She was surprised. Wasn't this device only activated when the base was looking for missing base members? Every member of the base would have this device installed on their mobile phones, but now it's suddenly lit up. Who was looking for her? And from this red light, the mobile phone that was activated now was not in Los Angeles, but in Cambodia. Who was in Cambodia? Who was looking for her? Phong Ling looked at the phone in doubt, sat up in the tent, thought about it, and got up to look out of the tent. The mountain was still dark, far away from the lights of the urban area, far away from everything, quiet, dark, as if incompatible with this world. There was no movement or trace. Was it because the base was afraid that she would be too slow to clear the mines here alone, so they sent someone to accompany her? Phong Ling hesitated for a while, returned to the tent, and called the base hall. The people in the base hall only said that someone from the base had indeed gone there, but they didn't know who was sent there by Boss Lee. Boss didn't inform them, so they didn't know for the time being. As soon as she heard that it was arranged by Li Nanheng, Phong Ling suddenly worried that he might have called Kay over, because Kay was the closest to her in the base, but Kay was now receiving intensive sniper training, and he couldn't delay the training just to accompany her. Phong Ling simply sent a message to Li Nanheng, "Boss." After sending it, there was still no response for a long time. Perhaps after being together for so long, they had a tacit understanding, such as Li Nanheng's temperament. Something must have happened for him to suddenly make so many calls in one day. Just as Phong Ling was feeling puzzled, her phone beeped with a message. She looked down. "Li Nanheng, be careful." Phong Ling, nearby. What happened? Before Li Nanheng replied, he suddenly received a call from Xiao Fei. "Phong Ling, we finally found your phone signal. The military doesn't plan on letting you go. 2 days ago, we learned that they had already sent people to infiltrate you. They don't plan on letting you come back alive. You have to be careful. If necessary, go down the mountain first. Don't stay on the mountain. There may be many unexpected people and weapons lying in ambush there." Phong Ling's eyes turned cold and she immediately understood why Li Nanheng suddenly contacted her. Then who are the local people in Cambodia now? I am now in Cambodia, and they still want to chase me across the border. From the beginning, they didn't intend to let you go because they are in the wrong. As long as you live, it will be a direct irony to them. It's useless to sacrifice a commander and Danny Ken. Only when you die can the whole thing come to an end. Phong Ling was silent for a moment. I see. Boss was already aware of the situation before we knew about it. He went to find you as soon as possible. Phong Ling was about to come out of the tent. After hearing this, she paused and her hand froze on the tent curtain for a while before she said, "All right, I see." After hanging up the phone, Phong Ling stood outside the tent, extinguished all the lights and flames, and then put all the guns and daggers that she could carry on her body into the hidden compartment of her clothes. If Boss Lee had arrived today, then the person who was searching for her with the equipment just now was him. He was in such a hurry and replied to her by text, which meant that he had approached the group of people who wanted to harm her and was now searching for her specific location, but could not contact her directly. Boss Lee might be hiding among those people now. A few hours later. Dawn was coming. Phong Ling, who hadn't slept all night, sat in the tall grass closest to her tent and watched the tent standing quietly in front of her on the hillside. Suddenly, her ears twitched. She heard a flash of lightning across the sky, and a bullet fired from a silencer broke through the air and hit the tent, leaving a black hole. Phong Ling watched this scene coldly and remained motionless in the grass. At the same time, she lowered her head to look at a snake that was 4 or 5 centimeters thick crawling past her. Although she was not afraid of snakes, because she couldn't move, she put her hands on the ground and the snake crawled over the back of her hands because she was motionless. The creepy coolness of the snake made her hair stand on end, and a chill ran down her spine. In the distance, because she hadn't heard any movement, footsteps had begun to come. From the faint rustling sound, there were at least 3 or 5 people within a distance of 300 meters. As several people appeared under a tree not far away, Feng Ling was about to raise her hand, but the snake slowly crawled over the back of her hand, and its tail was still there. She hesitated and didn't move, but then she looked at the head that appeared over there. It was such a good opportunity. If she didn't take action now, she was likely to be passive in the end, and then she could only wait for death in this place. Thinking of this, she maintained her original sitting posture and abruptly pulled her hand out from under the snake's tail. However, at that moment, the snake was alarmed. At the moment when it quickly crawled away, it suddenly turned back and stood up. At the moment when Feng Ling stood up, she felt a sharp pain in her shoulder and arm. She turned her eyes abruptly, only to see that the triangular-headed poisonous snake had turned back to bite her in such a terrible posture. This snake was obviously poisonous, and her heart skipped a beat. Without much time to think, she pulled the snake away, endured the numbness of half of her arm, raised the gun, and fired at the person who stuck his head out in that direction. Bang! Her gun was not silenced, but her marksmanship was superb. The person who had just stuck his head out from behind the tree was instantly shot in the head and fell to the ground. Feng Ling endured the pain and got up. She turned back and fired 2 shots at the snake that was about to crawl away. After shooting 3 inches and 7 inches, she kicked the dead snake back to her tent and quickly rushed in the direction of the tree, turning from passive to active, not giving the other party any chance. Chapter 960. However, the number of people who came was clearly more than what she heard. Just as Feng Ling quickly found 2 or 3 people, shot one of them in the head, and hid in the grass, several more people appeared on the other side, aiming their guns at her. Feng Ling quickly retreated. Right now, this group of people had already set up ambushes and assassinations. Her only chance of victory was that she was the only one who knew all the landmines nearby. With every step she took, she avoided the minefields on the ground. However, those people were obviously killers sent by the military directly from Cambodia. The people sent by the military did not show their faces in the dark. They were also very sharp, and they would remember where she went. The road extended all the way to the mountain. Because of the gunshots and the fast running back and forth, countless snakes were startled and scattered. Occasionally, some spotted snakes with flowers could be seen quickly crawling through the sparse grass. Feng Ling retreated all the way to a cliff above the Snake Valley. The cliff had just been cleared by her yesterday and she had scattered snake powder on it. Originally, she wanted to check the environment here, so she cleared the minefield on this road, but now she escaped here. She glanced at the dangerous cliff not far behind her, then turned back to look at the group of people chasing after her. The arm that had just been bitten by the snake had almost lost all feeling. She didn't know what kind of poison it was, but she felt that her body temperature was dropping bit by bit. She wanted to raise her gun, but she felt intense pain all over her body. Her head was also turning black. Hearing that the group of people had caught up to her, she closed her eyes and was about to take the risk to jump onto a tree to avoid the minefield on the other side. However, just as she was about to jump up, she suddenly staggered because of the pain in her chest and lungs. She half knelt on the ground. She couldn't tell how pale her face had become, and the color of her lips had also changed. There was even a light green tint in the whiteness. Every time she breathed, she felt as if there was a knife cutting her heart. Feng Ling closed her eyes, suspecting that even if she was not killed by these people, she would probably die of the snake venom soon. She staggered to her feet. Suddenly, she felt a cold stab on her back. She turned her eyes abruptly, only to see a sniper rifle aiming at her from a tree not far away. She was in a trance. Perhaps she had a hunch that she would die no matter which way she chose. Many people suddenly appeared in her mind. In her short life of less than 20 years, she had never seen her parents. She regarded the wolf as her mother, the base as her home, and Li Nanheng as the guide of her life. Until now. Was she going to be buried here in the end? The moment the sniper's shot rang, there was the sound of wind whistling through the air at the same time. With a trace of white light, it whistled past Feng Ling's eyes. Feng Ling raised her blurry eyes. What was that just now? And his silencer. His marksmanship was superb, deflecting the bullet that was about to hit her body in mid-air with the force of another bullet. Hearing the sound of two bullets piercing through the tree trunk on the edge of the cliff, Feng Ling wanted to see clearly, but her legs softened and she suddenly fell backward. However, just when she thought she was about to fall to the ground, a figure pounced on her. When she found that her body had been paralyzed to the point where she could no longer resist, he took her into his arms and then fiercely held her in his arms. Her vision darkened and she could barely see who it was, but from the familiar male scent that suddenly poured into her nose, she could clearly tell that it was Li Nanheng. He still came. Since she was a child, she had never been the one who was protected by others. Even in 11 base, she had always been the one who rushed to the front. But it seemed that only Li Nanheng would pull her back from difficulties again and again, and only he had the ability to protect her behind him. Feng Ling couldn't open her eyes and only said weakly, "Boss. I can't." "Be careful, Feng Ling." Li Nanheng hugged the girl in his arms tightly. When the other party was about to shoot again, he quickly carried her down into the tall grass. When he looked down and saw her face, he immediately frowned. He had expected her to be in trouble and be forced to the point where she couldn't resist, but he didn't expect her to be bitten by a snake. The people sent by the military were indeed more than Li Nanheng had imagined. Because this was a secret operation sent by the military, after the whole thing was solved on the surface, they couldn't have any conflicts on the surface. Otherwise, everything they had done before would be in vain. They couldn't drive a helicopter over and had to hide among these people all the way. Fortunately, Feng Ling reacted quickly and hid in the tent, but her face, Li Nanheng held her tightly in his arms, pressed his chin against her cheek, felt her cold body temperature, and whispered, "Hold on, don't sleep." Feng Ling opened her eyes again. She felt that she didn't need to close her eyes, but she just couldn't see clearly. Her lips were also extremely dry, but in order not to distract him, she still slightly pursed her pale unblue lips. And Feng Ling felt that Li Nanheng carried her on his back and ran between the minefields on the cliff. She didn't know where they were running to. She could only feel the whistling in her ears and the body temperature of the man who carried her on his back, which was a warm stove under her gradually cold body temperature. She closed her eyes and felt that her limbs were in a state of numbness, but she had thought that she would be forced to jump into the snake valley and be buried in the belly of the abdomen snake. If she died in his arms, maybe, that was not bad. Provided that he didn't get hurt because of her, and didn't die here. Li Nanheng. Feng Ling's mind was filled with phantoms, and her hand unconsciously gently grasped the clothes on his shoulder. Listening to the whistling in her ears, she said in a very low voice, "Thank you for coming to save me, thank you." Hearing the grateful tone in her voice as if she were saying her last words, Li Nanheng avoided the bullets and the minefields under his feet, held her on his back with one hand, and quickly dodged backward with the gun in the other hand. He took the time to look back and said coldly, "Shut up. After I die, just leave me here. Don't care about me, I told you to shut up." Feng Ling closed her eyes, suddenly grinned, pressed her head against his back, and said in a low voice, "Before I die, let me tell you a secret, okay?" Li Nanheng carried Feng Ling and jumped down a small hill near the cliff. In the eyes of those people, it looked like he jumped off the cliff. He quickly turned away in the grass and said coldly, "I don't want to hear it." Chapter 961. Feng Ling was a little aggrieved. It was rare for her to admit that she was a girl at this time. But he didn't want to hear it. She closed her eyes and did not speak. She could only feel the muscles on his back tense up and the strength in his body. The corners of her mouth curled up slightly. Regardless of whether he listened or not, she was not going to live. At the very least, before she died, she wanted to be a little girl in other people's eyes. I'm actually a girl, what you have to do now is to open your eyes and keep awake. I don't want to hear it. Got it? Li Nanheng suddenly interrupted her, his voice a little angry. Feng Ling's voice was choked in her throat. It was not that she didn't want to say it, but after being interrupted, she found that she was too dizzy to be conscious. She opened her mouth, but still weakly leaned her head on his back. Li Nanheng took advantage of the fact that the group of people dared not chase them because of the snake valley below and jumped down the mountain with Feng Ling on his back, avoiding the dangerous snake bones below, through the grass, and found a passage on the cliff near the mountain wall, but because there was a minefield under their feet, they couldn't jump over. Although the group of people who chased after them were pulled far away because of this negligence, they quickly reacted, found a path, and rushed over. If it weren't for the minefield, let alone one Feng Ling, even 3 Feng Lings could be easily taken away. But now there were landmines everywhere in this place. If they were not careful, they would be smashed into pieces and couldn't walk freely at all. More importantly, Feng Ling had entered a semi-conscious state. If they didn't stop to help her deal with the snake bite wound, the result would be unpredictable. Gunshots rang on the cliff. Feng Yin heard the gunshots, closed her eyes and frowned. Her only hand that could move was very numb. She tugged at his clothes with some difficulty and said hoarsely, Li Nanheng, don't worry, it'll be fine. Even though the only way to survive was to jump into the Snake Valley, there was no other way to escape. Li Nanheng stood on the cliff, comforting Feng Ling while observing the height below. Before those people got close, he spent 2 minutes observing the height and distance below. Then, he saw a stone platform that was covered by dense leaves. Although he did not know whether it was sturdy or not, at least it could temporarily save his life. Feng Ling didn't know what Li Nanheng was planning. However, the moment she was carried by the man and fell off the cliff, she only heard the sound of the rushing wind and the feeling of weightlessness. Feng Ling, whose shoulder was injured, felt her ears ringing. Right now, she should have been unable to hear anything, but she could hear Li Nanheng's steady heartbeat. For some reason, the corners of Feng Ling's eyes suddenly became wet. She didn't want to implicate him, but he still came. The people above had already caught up with them, but because they had already jumped down, they hesitated and didn't notice what was in the dense bushes under the cliff. After a few glances, they looked at each other and then at each other. This is the Snake Valley. No one can walk out of it alive. Our mission has been completed. We also killed the person in charge of 11 Base. It's really worth it. In order to avoid any mistakes, the people above stood on the cliff for a long time after they fell. After confirming that there was no movement below, Li Nanheng did not bring anyone up from other unknown channels. After standing guard for an hour, they left. After Feng Ling was brought down by Li Nanheng, the two of them had just landed on the stone wall. Although Li Nanheng's body was in the middle, Feng Ling, who was unconscious, fainted. Although this Snake Valley was not a bottomless abyss, the distance from the stone platform to the top of the cliff was at least a dozen floors high. It was covered by dense leaves and very hidden. Li Nanheng abruptly helped Feng Ling up. When they fell earlier, because of the continuous falling speed, there were cracking sounds, and the speed of their bodies had been slowed down by the dense branches above. Except for their internal organs feeling as though they had been displaced due to the force of the fall, they were not affected at all. Li Nanheng's body was scratched by the trees. Feng Ling's injuries were less, but there were some shallow bloodstains on her cheek. In addition, she had been bitten by a snake before. It was hard to imagine that she could still hold on in less than half an hour. Now she fell down like this and fainted completely. Fong Ling Li Nanheng looked at her face, looked at her with a dark look, and pressed her philtrum harder and harder. The unconscious girl in his arms faintly furrowed her brows. Her eyelids moved, but she seemed to be unable to open them. Her fingers that were hanging by her side also moved slightly. She tried hard to show that she was fine and that there was no need to worry, but she couldn't do it no matter what. Don't sleep, you can't sleep, Fong Ling, open your eyes. At the same time, Li Nanheng grabbed her hand and pressed it to the place between her thumb and index finger, stimulating her pain point. When Fong Ling frowned and opened her eyes slightly, he stared at her, looked at her, and held her tightly in his arms. Be good. Don't sleep. Once you fall asleep, you won't wake up, do you hear me? Fong Ling wanted to smile at him, but found that her lips were numb. Even when she spoke, her lips were so numb that she could barely move. She could only hear a vague voice coming from her half-opened lips. Boss, very, 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 very light, 2 words, so light that it seemed as though they could be blown away by the wind. Don't speak. Save your strength. If you're tired, use your fingers. I'll find a way to keep you awake, okay? Li Nanheng said as he reached out to pull her clothes. Fong Ling leaned into his arms and did not struggle or move. She allowed him to untie her black uniform and then silently lifted her bitten arm. She was wearing a loose t-shirt with short sleeves. When he rolled up the sleeves, he could see the purple blisters on her shoulder. Blisters appeared around the purplish wound, and blood seeped out of the wound. Fong Ling's body turned from cold to feverish. She trembled uncontrollably and seemed to have a slight cramp. How long have you been bitten? The man asked in a deep voice as he checked her wound. I don't know. About a minute or 2 after they shot at my tent. Although Fong Ling's eyes were half open and she seemed to be unconscious, and her voice was so weak that he had to lean his ears close to her to hear her clearly, at least she was still trying to stay awake. Chapter 962. That's less than half an hour. Hearing this, Li Nanheng helped Fong Ling lean against the mountain wall, took off her coat, and found a sharp dagger in the interlayer of her coat. Fong Ling leaned against the wall weakly, panting heavily. She felt that her breathing was irregular, and she was in a daze. Hearing a sound, she opened her eyelids with some difficulty, only to see that Li Nanheng had casually grabbed a pile of fallen leaves and a thin branch that was easy to ignite. He lit a small fire with a lighter and placed the dagger on it to roast. She sat there motionlessly and could only see the man's movements. After roasting the dagger for a few minutes, Li Nanheng turned around, took the dagger, put his shoulder to her mouth, held her arm with one hand, and held the dagger with the other, saying indifferently, "Bite me if it hurts." Fong Ling looked up at him. It's been half an hour. The poisonous blood has probably, don't talk nonsense. Kill as many as you can. Save your life first. Li Nanheng warned, don't move. The next moment, Fong Ling's arm that had been numb to the point of numbness instantly felt a piercing pain. Without anesthesia, the pain of flesh being cut could be clearly felt. Although it was not to the extent of cutting her flesh, the dagger that had just been roasted by the fire for a long time to kill the bacteria directly cut across on her shoulder. In order to reduce her pain, Li Nanheng's hand moved very quickly. With 2 slashes, a perfect cross was formed, and then dark blood that was sticky because of the snake venom flowed out. At the same time, the man took off his belt and wrapped it around her shoulders. Then, he tightened it until the blood stopped flowing toward her heart. Fong Ling was in so much pain that a layer of sweat had appeared on her forehead, but she still bit her lips and refused to make any sound of pain, nor did she bite Li Nanheng's shoulder. While helping her squeeze out most of the poisonous blood, Li Nanheng looked back at her pained expression. Endure it. Okay. Feng Ling nodded with sweat all over her forehead, closed her eyes, and let him continue. When the thick blood on the surface gradually became normal and the color was no longer as dark as when it was first squeezed out, Li Nanheng lowered his head and sucked it with his mouth. Feng Ling trembled all over and turned to look at the man who was sucking it with his mouth. She rushed to avoid him but did not have the strength. Don't. She felt that the wound covered by the man's lips was even hotter and said hoarsely, "This won't do." Li Nanheng spat out a mouthful of dark blood and said indifferently, "My mouth is not injured. I'm fine." "Boss, you can't do this." However, no matter how she refused, Li Nanheng still did it. When he felt that it was enough, the blood was still flowing out. Li Nanheng glanced at his coat, unbuttoned it, and was about to take off his clothes. Feng Ling understood what he was going to do next and immediately said hoarsely, "Boss, do you need a cloth to tie it up to stop the bleeding?" "Yes," the man answered without hesitation and took off his clothes without hesitation. Seeing that he was about to tear off his clothes, Feng Ling hurriedly raised her hand and covered the back of his hand with some difficulty. Don't. I have cloth. I have." As if understanding what she meant in an instant, Li Nanheng looked at her calmly and followed her words. "What?" Feng Ling looked at him, bit her pale lips, and then suddenly smiled in relief. She retracted her hand, slowly put it on the collar of her t-shirt, and then unbuttoned the front buttons one by one. Although it was a little difficult, she still did it slowly. Because of her action, Li Nanheng didn't move again. He just looked at her silently. After the clothes inside were completely unbuttoned, Feng Ling slowly opened the clothes, revealing the flat chest wrapping cloth inside. "Don't you want cloth?" "I have a lot." Li Nanheng stared at her face motionlessly and then at the chest wrapping cloth on her body. If they weren't in such an environment, perhaps he wouldn't be able to control all his feelings and emotions when he saw her suddenly being so honest. But at this moment, there was no chance for him to explode. There was only one purpose, that was, the snake venom in her body was very serious. She couldn't die. There was no smile or surprise in the man's eyes. He just said lightly, "What is this?" Feng Ling took a deep breath with some difficulty and said, "Yes, a lot of cloth." Li Nanheng glanced at the blood still flowing on her arm and said hoarsely, "I'm asking you, what is this?" Feng Ling stared at him, her eyes frank and fearless. "This is my secret." "Your secret?" "The secret is that you are actually a woman." Li Nanheng's expression didn't change at all. She couldn't tell whether he just knew it at this moment or had known it a long time ago. Feng Ling couldn't see through him, so she didn't explain much. She just raised her hand to pull off the chest wrapping cloth and said softly, "Anyway, it's impossible for me to return to the base alive. So what if I'm a man or a woman? I have to be honest for once before I die." "Didn't you say I was not honest enough?" Feng Ling looked at him, her eyes full of relief. "I'm honest now." Seeing that she was about to untie the cloth, Li Nanheng reached out to hold her hand, and then buttoned her shirt one by one expressionlessly. At the same time, he took off his own clothes, tore them into strips, and quickly tied them to the wound on her shoulder. Seeing that the man didn't speak but didn't stop, Feng Ling looked at him blankly. Seeing that his face was so dark, she couldn't help saying hoarsely, "Boss, are you angry that I hid it from you for so long?" Li Nanheng didn't speak but tightened his grip on the cloth on her shoulder. "I'm sorry." Her voice was low and weak, as if it could be blown away by the wind. "If it weren't for the fact that I can't live, I don't know how long I will pretend to be a man, but now," she suddenly grinned. It's also a kind of happiness to die by boss's side. Don't speak. You're very noisy now. Li Nanheng looked irritated, picked up another piece of cloth and continued to help her wrap it up. However, Feng Ling's head was heavy and she felt that her consciousness was dissipating. Her voice was also weak, and her eyes were empty as she whispered, "Boss, thank you for liking me. You let me spend most of my limited life and limited happiness with you. I will die without regrets, asking for monthly votes." Chapter 963. Feng Ling did not move and allowed him to kiss her fiercely. However, even though he was angry and even carried a trace of fear that she could not detect, even though the kiss was fierce, he remembered that he had just sucked the poisonous blood from her wound, so no matter how hard he was, he did not bite their lips. However, just this strength was enough for Feng Ling to feel the anger in his emotions. She leaned weakly in his arms and allowed him to kiss her like this. After the kiss, Li Nanheng lowered his eyes to look at her eyes that were about to lose focus. He held her shoulders and said sternly, "Don't sleep." Feng Ling tried to open her eyes and look at him. Her pale lips didn't show any sign of redness because of his kiss but were still white with a hint of blue. "Be obedient. Don't sleep." Li Nanheng could see that she was trying to hold on, so he held her shoulder tightly. "If you can't hold on, tell me. Don't close your eyes quietly. Don't sleep." "Okay." Feng Ling responded in a low voice and leaned back against the mountain wall with the help of the man. She thought that once the secret that she was a woman was known by Boss Li, she might face his anger or punishment, or even be driven out of the base. Even she didn't expect that she would be in such an environment. It seemed that at this time, he really didn't have the mood to be surprised. That was good. At the very least, she managed to escape his wrath. After all, she had deceived the entire base for so long. Feng Ling lowered her head and thought to herself, but Li Nanheng checked all the wounds on her body and confirmed that there was no problem except for the shoulder that was bitten by a poisonous snake. Li Nanheng took out his cell phone and glanced at it. There was no signal. Then he glanced at Feng Ling and took out her cell phone from her pocket. There was also no signal. 100 meters below the cliff was the center of the Snake Valley. They couldn't jump down from here. The snakes that occasionally crawled up and down the mountain were extremely fierce, and the Snake Valley was the place where snakes lived in groups in Cambodia. Looking up, there was a forest of green trees on and off the cliff. Because the sky had just lit up, most of the leaves were with the smell of morning dew and grass, and the dry branches that Li Nanheng picked up on this stone platform were only a few. Everything around was very quiet, except for some occasional rustling sounds. Even if they didn't listen carefully, they knew what it was. From the speed of the sound, they could almost tell how long the snake was crawling on the cliff. In this silence, Feng Ling held on for a long time. If it weren't for her good physical quality, she would have been dead long ago. But no matter how weak she was just a human being. That kind of poisonous snake was obviously very poisonous. If she couldn't be sent to the hospital immediately, she would definitely die in 1 or 2 days, or even in a few hours. There were dense forests and minefields all over the mountain, and there was no living person. Occasionally, there was the sound of snakes crawling nearby, which made Feng Ling instinctively more careful. After a long time, Feng Ling couldn't hold on anymore. She closed her eyes for 2 minutes while Li Nanheng got up and looked for a way to climb up the mountain. However, in these 2 minutes, many strange images appeared in her mind. In the dark night, the endless sea, the cold air, and the 1-year-old girl who was washed to the shore, crying helplessly. She walked on the shore with her short legs that had just learned to walk, crying as she walked. When she fell, she would climb up and continue crying. She cried until she was tired, until she was hungry, until she wanted milk, food, water, and her mother. However, there was nothing. There was only the shore near the jungle and the endless sea in the distance. Feng Ling opened her eyes in a great pain. Perhaps because of the influence of those very young memories, she didn't know whether it was a blurry memory of when she was 1 year old or something else. When could a person's earliest memory be traced back? It was definitely impossible when she was a baby, but the memory of when she was 1 year old, although blurry, at least it really belonged to her. Seaside? Why was it the seaside? Perhaps it was Li Nanheng's angry and worried gaze that woke her up. She looked up at him and whispered, "Boss, didn't I tell you not to sleep?" The man knew that she couldn't hold on anymore, but he still pressed his hand on her. "Don't sleep." Feng Ling looked at him, smiled, and said softly, "This mountain wall can't be climbed up, right?" Li Nanheng's eyes darkened. "It's all right. I'll take you out as soon as possible." "How?" No matter how powerful Li Nanheng was, it was impossible for him to fight against such a harsh natural environment. She had been clearing mines here and walking back and forth for so many days, so she was already very familiar with the terrain and environment here. Because no one dared to approach this mountain, and there were too many snakes crawling back and forth all year round, the grass, ground, and stones were covered with moss and other things similar to moss. This place was very steep, and the mountain wall was very slippery, so it was impossible to climb up. At this time, Li Nanheng picked up the daggers carried by the two of them, got up, and cut off all the strong vines around the stone platform. With sharp eyes and nimble hands, when a snake climbed down dangerously toward him, he nimbly raised his hand, and the blade slid hard on the snake's vital point. In an instant, a green snake with a triangular head fell down softly, and Li Nanheng kicked it off the stone platform. Watching the man throw the thick vines in front of her, Feng Ling frowned. She really wanted to say that there was no need to be so troublesome. If he was alone, it might be easier to find a way to leave, but if he wanted to take her away with him, who was currently weak, it would be even more difficult. However, there was one thing she was very sure of. Even if there was no signal on their phones, fortunately, their phones were cut off at this position, and if they never recovered, 11 Base would definitely notice and come to rescue them as soon as possible. She just didn't know if she could hold on when they came. She wanted to speak, but she saw that Li Nanheng had cut off the parts of the broken vines that would stab his hand and then threw them to her hand. Feng Ling suddenly frowned because she saw that when Li Nanheng's back was facing her, she saw a faint bloodstain on the back of his black uniform. Right now, her sense of smell was almost numb. Earlier, she didn't smell any blood, but now she remembered. "Li Nanheng, do you want me to kill you?" That you're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.